Okay, folks, ready? 7 o'clock, a little after. Okay, tonight is Thursday, September 18th, 2014, special board meeting. Vicki, would you please take the roll?
Dan Collins.
Dan is unavailable tonight.
D'Anthony Paterno.
Here.
Scott Zimmerman.
Here.
Dr. Brawley.
Here.
Vicki Lee is here. John Heidi.
Here.
And Bob Johnson.
Here.
All right, tonight is a special meeting. We're going to be talking about just two topics, if the time allows. The one topic is going to be the superintendent evaluation. We're going to take a lead from our IASB representative, Barb Toney, who's here tonight with us. And we're going to have a discussion to create as objective a document as possible for superintendent evaluation going forward. If at all possible, it would be most opportune to complete this document tonight. That way it's signed, sealed, and delivered, and we can go forward utilizing it as an objective evaluative tool. The second half would be the committee discussion that we started to talk about very early on in our board retreat. In the packet from the July 11th, 12th retreat, there were some documents that kind of look like this and headed Considering Board Structure and Use of Committees. It was some time ago, and I hope folks referred back to that, but Barb has some extras if necessary. We will only entertain that discussion if we really have some time. I don't want to get into it and have to leave it midstream. So, but tonight I want to devote any and all resources available to discussing the superintendent evaluation. One final topic in today's Advocate, something came out about the city council seats that are coming up. The first ward alderman is not going to be rerunning, and it said if anybody had any desire to run for those city council seats, they can contact the city hall and pick up packets and such to run. It also mentioned that there's available seats on the Board of Education as well as the Park District, and it left the phone number to call the Hendy Center to pick up packets. Well, we know that that's not going to be the case, and I've asked Dr. Hines to speak to Bernadette to see if we can get something out in the newspaper and let people know what's going to be going on with that. Apparently the first day signatures will be able to be obtained is going to be the 23rd of September, which is not too terribly far away. So I do want to get that clarified out in the public. So that being said, I'd like to open by introducing Barb Toney, who's very familiar to the board, most recently at our board study session. And tonight, if you would please lead us in a discussion to hammer out this evaluation.
Great, thank you.
All right.
And thanks for having me back again.
Should we have a microphone over for Barb?
Oh, yeah.
Actually, Barb, why don't you move over? Just take that seat. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. So I appreciated, you did a lot of really good work back in July when I was with you for the day, and so this is kind of an extension of some really important board work that needs to be done. And the good news is, what did I not? Oh. Is that better? Yes. Okay, thank you. We can hear you now. You can hear me now, okay. So the good news for this board is that Lori has done a tremendous amount of work ahead of time. So what I wanted to do was kind of walk you through what a typical superintendent evaluation process, evaluation kind of how to develop a tool would look like, and you're way ahead of it, so we're going to jump right through it. But I think just as in terms of framing how a board would want to think about and the superintendent would think about superintendent evaluation, I thought it was kind of important to just show you the different steps and then get right into the draft that Lori put together and how it can, and see what the board thinks about it. And by the way, I know I'm going to forget. So in your folder, I also have a reminder of the North Cook Division dinner meeting, which is October 22nd at Cafe La Cave in Des Plaines. Dean Crone, who's a partner in Hodges, Louisiana, Eisenhower, is going to be talking about TIF districts. And I understand.
Yeah, I still don't think that that's a picture of Dean Crone.
No?
I still don't think so.
Okay, well, we took it off the website,
Okay.
so, yeah, but,
That's him, that's him.
is this your
You
law
would say
firm?
the same thing if you looked at my photo.
We say, this doesn't look like Dan, no. So at any rate, this is, he does a really good job. We heard from several different board members how he's helped their board and their district, so, something to think about. So, on the left-hand side of your folder, this is a brand-new book. I mean, it's practically, ink is still wet, of about a 2-year process that we put together. We had a previous book that we just felt wasn't meeting our needs and meeting the needs of our members. And so we put this together. I'm not going to go through this at all, but I wanted you to have it because I just think it's really good resource
The
information.
board has seen this. If you recall, I gave this to you. This is one of the tools I used to
Oh, good.
construct my evaluation. And so a lot of it
Came from here?
You received, when I gave it to you, just a paper copy. It wasn't
Yeah.
fancy.
So now you have a fancy copy, so. And then underneath that is just a review of the 8 steps to developing an evaluation process. And one of the key things, I think, and we're gonna talk about in a minute, is having the board, in addition to evaluating the superintendent, evaluating their own performance. And you've already done that, we did that in July. Because we think a board, before they evaluate the superintendent, kind of needs to know where you are and put your own house in order, so to speak, before you start evaluating the superintendent. So you've done that, which is wonderful. And so we're gonna move from that, and the 8 steps to this, on the right side, the purple document that looks like this, and it says current status checklist. And so it's just kind of a way for you to see, what do we have in place here, what do we need? So you'll see that, first, the board commitment to effective governance. That means, have you done a board self-evaluation, which you did July 12th, so we've done that. Superintendent job description. Lori's made some copies of some documents that we're gonna wanna go over, because one of the things that's important to look at in a superintendent evaluation instrument is aligning the different district documents. So one of the documents is a superintendent job description, which we put in front of you tonight, right? And then, so you got that. I'm sorry?
I think it was emailed.
Oh, was it emailed?
It was a rattling email.
Okay, so, but do people have it? Some of you do, some of you don't. Okay, so, another document that we wanna make sure is aligned with the, in the instrument, is the superintendent contract, because you know that if you offer a multi-year contract to a superintendent, by law, you have to have performance goals and indicators in the contract.
And if I can say
Yeah,
that,
please do.
when we were doing that, to get this completed, we agreed that we would use very generic, nebulous goals to complete the parameters, just to get Lori signed on. I mean, we didn't want
Call
her.
them placeholders.
Yeah, we didn't want her walking away for any reason, so we wanted to get this done. And with the full thought that we would undergo this process and we would develop this with her full participation and knowledge. So we have, if you look in her contract, there are some
Pretty
nebulous
vague,
things,
right.
but, yeah.
And there is a copy at your place for that. So you have that. And I want to say also, I do this workshop all the time, and I go into districts and they go, oh, job description? I don't know. Does a superintendent need a job description? So,
It's
kudos.
4 pages long.
Yeah.
It hasn't been looked at since 2012.
Yeah, so at some point I mean, I looked at it and it's very long. It's very long. And actually, you know, what I think Lori will end up, Dr. Hanson will end up doing is really focusing on the evaluation instrument. But it's just good to know that you have this. Kind of looking at the goals for the district and the goals for the superintendent. What you also have is that 1-year roadmap, and is that in your packet? Or
That was emailed to us.
that was emailed too? Okay, so, because this is a really important document, because this is, we want to see this in the evaluation instrument. And then expectations, measurements, and performance evaluation instrument, we're all going to talk about that. Other items, just for your own information, I did include, this yellow sheet is the performance goal statute that just explains by law why you have to have performance goals in the contract. And it does say they should be linked to student performance and academic improvement within the schools of the district. So even though it's nebulous in her contract, it's there. So, as we look at the evaluation instrument that Dr. Hines put together, there is, she used what's called the ISLIC standards, which is short for, I have it. It's for the Interstate School Leaders Licensure Consortium, which is why they call it ISLIC. And so I know that Dr. Hines used this, which is one that we would recommend to use as a basis for the evaluation instrument. And then underneath that, and we'll get to that near the end of the meeting tonight, is any next steps that you feel like you want to look at. So let's take a look at, well, first of all, Dr. Hines, do you want to kind of talk a little bit about the draft that you put together and kind of explain it? And then I think what we need to do is kind of go piece by piece and make sure that the board is comfortable with it.
So, sure. So what I've done is, as you said, I've taken the ISLIC standards and kind of named them. So, for example, one is vision, and what does a vision do? Why is it important? What would some of the tasks that a typical superintendent would do to ensure that they're focusing the district and stakeholders on vision? I pulled out some of the bullet points from the ISLIC standards, and then based on the roadmap that I've created and just kind of what I know is going to be happening over the course of this year, I plugged in, if you will, what I think evidence would be to support whether or not at the end of my first year when you go to evaluate me, how would you know if I've done an effective or hopefully an exemplary job with standard one, developing vision, promoting vision within the district. So, and then I followed that same format throughout all the standards. I did wind up adding a few because I feel as though other parts of important work that I do weren't necessarily represented in the ISLIC standards. So, for example, communication, community relations, policy and governance. I just thought that those were very important aspects of a superintendent's job that I didn't want to lose track of.
Lori, when I was going through this, and I think tonight, because it's such a small group, we should make this as informal as possible. But when I was reading through this, I noticed that there's quite a bit of overlap from one area to another area. And that may be on purpose, and I think they probably kind of all flow together.
Right.
They all flow together. If Dan Collins was here, I'm sure he would be talking about metrics. And your roadmap certainly is a model, really. It's a great document, but we have to develop metrics so that we can ensure that these things are going to happen, that are in there. One of the things that I wrote down, for instance, I had really no problems with the superintendent will and evidence to support growth in goal areas, but I added a couple of other things, one of which would be, we're going to do the CEC. We need to do an analysis of that data and publicize that and get it out into the community so that folks know what is and isn't going on. So it's not just to do where it says completion of the overview system assessment with CEC. It's actually do an analysis of that data. And maybe that's part of it. Maybe that was intended. But I think it's important to make certain that it's delineated. And going forward, my point by stating that is that if it's pretty concrete in this document, a year from now, there won't be any questions. We all agree going forward what is and isn't what we're looking for, and it's done. And then we don't have to go, oh, we really were meaning this. It's done. So to have an analysis of that data, the completion of the strategic plan, and the other half of that would be to start the development of that strategic plan, start the implementation of it. We can have the document. What are we going to do with the document?
So the implementation will be 2015-16.
Exactly.
So I have a question. I have the document. I don't know the best way to capture all this. Should I type right in this document? We're having a discussion, so I don't want to lose track of all these points.
Well, I have these,
I don't know
but
the best way to.
I think right now it's just I'm throwing these
Okay.
things out to see if anybody else, number one, agrees with this, and see if anybody wants to work on this one standard one vision. What a year from now we would like to go back and measure on.
I guess maybe one thing that may help, I'm trying to figure out how we're gonna organize the
Mhm.
evening. It sounds like, Tony, you wanna just kind of dive in and wordsmith the document and go point by point. I don't know whether Barb or Lori has other stuff they wanna present to us before we do that, or, you know, how we ought to proceed.
You know, my thought is to do just that. The only thing I wanted to point out is I think, I went through the job description and the contract to see if in the tool as presented, there is still evidence of that. And there is, in my opinion, because we want to make sure that it's all aligned. And so it's somewhere in the draft evaluation tool is the job description and the contract. I really think it's important to make sure that the roadmap is captured. And I actually was talking to Dr. Hines right before the meeting tonight, and I only found one area. So in terms of the roadmap, assessments to monitor and support individual student growth is one. That one, I wasn't sure is in there, and so we talked about maybe where that might go. But I just want to let you know so that you have a good feeling about this. Standards-based curricular programs, I found that there was information on curriculum. Developing, recruiting, and retaining highly qualified staff is in there. Ensure all facilities are safe and provide a positive learning environment is in there. And ensure fiscal solvency is in there. Whoops, is it on the page? Develop practices of effective organization, partnership with all stakeholders, and that's in there when you talk about community. So my assessment was that everything was in there with the possible exception of student growth. So we might want to figure out where we're going to plug that in.
Well, in number 2, I think we can talk about that.
Yeah, that would be great. So I'm very comfortable with you just jumping in, because in order for us to get through this tonight, you know, and get it all completed, I think that's important. The only thing I wanted to point out before we get into the guts of this is the rating. This is and why don't you talk about what?
You and I talked about this
Yeah.
last week. So Barb has shared that the rating language, kind of the descriptor, if you will, it varies from district to district, and upstate, downstate, and everywhere in between. What I used was the rating that's found within the other administrative evaluation.
In this
tool.
district.
In this district. So I chose to just use the same
And the teachers
scale.
as well, right?
Well, yes, but the teacher's
Which is a little
document
different.
is gonna need to be revised, that's gonna be a work in progress over the next few years. The principal evaluation document was revised 2 years ago to be compliant with PARA and PIA. So, and that's where when we had to go to that 4 rating system, I pulled the language from there.
But the teachers looking at this, and I'm sure I'm missing a word, the teacher's document will look materially
Yes.
like this.
Yes,
Okay,
indeed.
so the idea is the principal down to the teacher
Uh-huh.
is aligned with a similar rating scale, and I like that
I like that
theoretically.
too.
So as long as that's the direction, I'm comfortable.
And Barb wasn't sure if I should have it that way or not, and it, you know, made me think.
And
I
as
thought
long
it's-
as you, and I don't have any, I don't have any problems with it. It's just that as I do this work, I mean, I've seen every different kind of rating, that can be, you know, from a five Likert scale, you know, 5-point Likert scale, to a yes, no, improving, to, you know, with only 3, to all these different things. And I think before we even get into the details of it, it's important to get concurrence from the board that they're comfortable with this. I mean, the fact that it is aligned with other administrators, and that Dr. Hines is comfortable with it, I just want to make sure that the board is comfortable. One of the things that she also did that is very good is that she defined the terms, because that's key. I mean, so what's outstanding to one person, you know, what's the difference between so for the purpose of the video, so we have outstanding, excellent, good, and below average, but each one of those has a descriptor. So always exceeds expectations is outstanding, exceeds expectations is excellent, meets expectations is good, and seldom meets expectations is below average. So,
Oh, wait, so now you have,
oh, did you change it, or do I have a
No.
different one?
Different document.
hold
I
on,
had distinguished,
we have
proficient,
the,
needs
hold on,
improvement.
Beverly.
Oh, I have
Send
an
it
old
to
one?
you. I think so, hold on
For
just
chance.
one.
How do you like that?
You have the one that was not aligned to the principal evaluation.
Ah.
document. You can pass that to her. I apologize.
Okay.
Barbara.
Well, that's okay.
That must be from July.
Okay. So, forget what I just said. We
Before
have
before I knew the principal evaluation tool in July. That was
Yeah,
something
yeah.
I dove into after our advance in the middle of July.
Good. Okay, so, now we have distinguished, proficient, needs improvement, and unsatisfactory. And a descriptor of each one, so that if anybody, so consistently exemplary performance is distinguished, proficient is consistently strong, and then the others. So before we even go further than that, is the board comfortable with this grading scale?
I personally don't have any comment on it. I think that perhaps over this coming year, the board can revisit this and do a further analysis, but I don't think that this necessarily needs to be altered tonight. I would like to utilize this. The most important thing is standardizing the superintendent's evaluation along the lines with everybody else. And then once it's standardized, then we can reevaluate. At least that's how I would look at it for going forward.
What about the rest of the board? Are you in agreement?
I'm fine with that. I would actually hope we don't have to revisit it this year. I think, changing something as somebody continues through a period, I would think isn't a good thing. We should just have sort of a clear guideline, and then, we can change it for the next period, I'd suggest maybe, but not change it for the period that's in place, so to speak.
Well, there's no period. You mean for the 3-year contract? Is that
No,
what
I'm
you're
just
saying?
talking about this year. I guess I'm just thinking on an annual basis, so right
Yeah.
now I'm just thinking of year one was all I was focused
Isn't
on.
that what you said? Was
Yeah.
that what you meant?
That's
Yeah.
exactly what it would be.
Yeah.
Solid for year one, and then any review over the coming year would be for the following year.
All right, great.
And I think that that's a crucial point too, is that this is a work in progress. And after a year, and after you have your evaluation, you're gonna sit down and you're gonna say what worked, what didn't work, and go from there. But it's a good start. So, okay, so we're comfortable with the rating. So let's wade through each one of these and, standards and hear from the board what you're thinking.
Any other thoughts on standard one vision? I think it's pretty well defined, frankly. The standard one is definitely and succinctly different from standard two, and I thought there was a lot of carryover from 1 to 2. And I started writing notes on 1, and then I flipped the page, and I'm like, half that stuff really ought to be under number 2. So I think number 1 should be general, broad outlines of the vision that the superintendent has for the district, obviously with the support from the Board of Education. And how is that vision exemplified? It would be through the development of the strategic plan, and obviously that's year 1, but once that's created, reinforcing that strategic plan. The roadmap, and every year your roadmap will change because you will identify necessities that will have to be done. So continually producing a roadmap, an evolving roadmap that will have to be plugged in and evolve. The overview system assessment with CEC. Now, I do not believe that that's going to necessarily be on a yearly basis.
No, that is correct.
Yeah, but I think that the most important aspect, at least for this coming year, that I'd like to see is once we do that, let's do something with that. And maybe you can help us define what that will be, what that will look like. An analysis, a presentation, where do we go from that? I'm not familiar with that process, so I'm really looking forward to it. You have. So maybe that one area can be fleshed out right there.
Sure, and I'm also going to serve, prior to us starting our system overview assessment, I will serve as an evaluator in another district, starting in November. So I will spend 3 days being an evaluator of a district school system in LaGrange, I believe. And so I will have that information, a different lens. So I think that will help us then move through the process. And I think after all is said and done, I would love to, do a report to the board in terms of where we're, how we ranked and where we have opportunities for improvement and where we were really strong. Then that data will be very important. When I met with the gentleman I intend to hire to do our strategic plan, he knows Perry, whom you've all met, and he says the data will be used to really inform the strategic plan. So
Yeah, and
I'm
I was
excited.
involved with CEC and their work with another district. For the 1 year they came in, they did the system assessment. I wasn't part of it then, but I was part of the strategic plan. And I did see how valuable that was and how they moved from that system assessment to how it informed the whole strategic plan. So it's really a wonderful process. But I think that the evidence to support growth, as long as, I think it's important in what Tony said. So completion of the overview of the system assessment, what are you gonna do with that? I mean, so I think some of these, we need to tease out, what's that gonna look like? So, when you said it may be an analysis and review and report of that system, so just completing it is one thing, but then, it probably needs something else for the board to see. So if you wanna say an analysis
So
to report or
With
something?
data analysis, I started jotting down, and then
Data analysis and plan for implementing any recommendations. Because obviously we don't know what that will look like now until the report's completed, but with a forethought in mind that something will come out of this plan, and then we're gonna wanna deliberate and come to some agreement on moving forward with that.
I think what will end up happening too is that it's important for you to see the results and the report, but then what you're gonna do with that will come out in the strategic plan, I think. So and when Perry comes in and does that, he'll be able to help you. What do we do with this now? Do we just take this and hand it to the strategic plan process? Or are there things that you can do immediately in response to that?
And we'll know that after we receive they do an oral report after the 3 days, and then within a week, they send you a written report. That would be when we would, as a board, go over that written report and look at the opportunities for improvement that they list and prioritize them and figure out if there's something we need to do outside of the strategic plan, or if we just need to use the data and embed it within the strategic plan.
Yeah, and I think that's something that can be discussed once this thing has been done. But that leads to the second thing, which is the strategic plan, which ultimately should be the driver behind where this district is headed. When I first got on in 2011, we would have reports on strategic plan implementation, on yearly reports. There was no tangible effect that I could see, hear from, touch. We would get reports, and we did this, and we're in the second year, and we've spent this much, and I mean the reports were great, but there was nothing tangible that I could lean on. I could tell people, well, the report said we did X, Y, and Z. I'm wondering, is there a more tangible way to show if the strategic plan says this, you can see an outcome from that? Or, and I'm not, I don't know, I don't have the answer to this question, I'm just throwing it out there. Is there a way, and John, when you were intimate with the first strategic plan process.
I think, in retrospect, I think the strategic plan, the strategic plan accomplished some things, but I think the strategic plan probably didn't meet the expectation that a number of us had on the board of being the document that really would drive what was going on in the district. And I don't think that's because we failed in advance to figure out how to describe it or what work product to get as a result. I think just as it played out and as we created the strategic plan, the plan did not resonate as well. It did not fit changing circumstances as well as we hoped it would when we created it. So, we need to do a better job if we can this time. I don't know how much of that was just bad luck, how much of that was changing circumstances, how much of that we could have avoided if we had used a different process for the strategic plan, or, whether, we just didn't get lucky. But, my hopes for this strategic planning process is that the result really is at the center of what the district is doing and stays that way.
Well, that being said, I would suggest that putting down as a metric here is that our strategic plan, the one that you're going to help craft over this coming year, be the document that ultimately drives the direction of the district. And by stating that, it makes certain that the document doesn't kind of spin off into a nebulous area. That's how I would think that we'd go about correcting that. We absolutely make certain that becomes the driver for going forward. Was that ever spoken about in the previous strategic plan? Where it was all...
Oh, yeah, it was absolutely spoken about. That was the whole point of it. And the whole point of the process was to make sure that the plan was central and that every aspect of the plan was going to be in somebody's job description for the year, and that, you know, it was going to get driven forward. But, you know, I think if once you roll out a couple of years past the plan, we were working on things that were not really contemplated by the plan, and those began to take more oxygen.
Gotcha. I
So,
gotcha.
you
Like
know,
facilities, perhaps.
yeah, facilities was an excellent example, did not appear anywhere in the plan. To some degree, Common Core is another example. You know, there were things in the plan that were related to Common Core,
Mhm.
but there was never anything in the plan that said, you know, item number 3, Common Core.
Part of the issue that will be different, one of the differences with this new process that we'll use is that it's a document that you don't just write and frame. It'll be a living document, it'll
It
be
evolves.
electronic, we're gonna look at it. So since you wrote it the last time, you know, Common Core wasn't even a thing,
Right.
so to speak. So when new initiatives, mandates, state or federal, come on board, you need that, a way in which you can update the strategic plan outside of the 5-year window. So it's responsive
So
to
if the,
changing circumstances.
if the strategic plan going forward is going to be a living, breathing document, which I absolutely agree with, there should be a plan then delineated to state that the strategic plan will be the driving factor to lead the district in the future, and that plan will be reviewed for appropriate changes necessary to do that. And again, I'd rather just get it out clearly stated now so that we don't have any confusion a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now.
Can I ask a question about how the evaluation actually, you know, gets used in here so that I make sure that I understand what needs to be in the text of this thing? If I'm reading between the lines right, it sounds like, Lori, before the board evaluates you, you will do a self-evaluation. And the way this is set up, it looks like the items under the superintendent will are kind of the general standards. Those will absolutely not change. Then under evidence to support growth in the goal area, you've got 3 things in here and you've got 2 blank bullet points. Am I right to read that as you do your self-evaluation, you're going to put in whatever evidence you think you have of having done the things up above, and kind of at a minimum, these 3 things are kind of non-optional. You know, you're going to have to address the roadmap, you're going to have to address the strategic plan, but then the blanks kind of indicate that you can add in whatever else you feel is relevant.
I can or you can. So
Okay.
I plugged in a few things that I knew kind of off the bat that were on the roadmap that could serve as that ever important M word, the metric. If I'm leading with vision, I need to have this roadmap that I will deploy. I need to help make sure that we complete the system overview assessment. I need to make sure we complete the strategic plan, and those are all year 1. Now, year 2, those terms will change to deploy the roadmap or the strategic plan to, you know, that will evolve. So we can add other items here, and then there can still be some blanks, but I plugged in what I knew for sure would align.
Okay.
Now, if you go to the second to the last page, or maybe your last page, under key dates. So goal setting moving forward will take place in August. Every August we'll do this. I will provide you a narrative summary in January at a board meeting in terms of my progress within these areas, kind of give you a mid-year, where am I? And then you can give me feedback you know, to me in terms of where you'd like to see me spending more time, or if I'm off the mark in any of these areas. I'd like to know, certainly before April, that I have to course correct. Then I will do an end of the year self-assessment in April, where I will write another narrative and kind of give you evidence, just like our teachers and our principals provide in terms of what I've been able to do in each of these areas. And then I will give all that to you, and then you guys will have to decide, and that's something that Barb can help the group with. What is the best way for each of you to complete this? Because in past districts where I've worked, each individual board member completes something in a narrative form, or writes notes and whatnot, and then submits it to the board president that does a synthesis of all the feedback. And, John, you can tell me, when you were the president, if that sounds like the process you followed with Sally and or Phil?
The way we've done it the whole time I've been on
Okay.
the board, where individual people fill it out and then it's put into a summary document.
Okay, so that would be kind of how I would see this process unfolding. Barb, if I've forgotten anything, or if you have any other suggestions, this is all new to me. You're by far the expert at the table. You let me know.
No, I think that's great, and I really like that you got a mid-year, because I think
Yeah.
that's crucial. In terms of the process, what we recommend, and I don't know if this is how you've done it before, so once everybody fills out, and what you might want to do is take this document and put it into like an instrument format so that they can actually check things and everything, and then it gets filled out. You meet together as a board without the superintendent, discuss it, come up with, the board speaks with one voice, so come to consensus on these things, because you can't, you have to give her marching orders and from one, one voice. Then typically, and I don't know how you did this before, but a lot of times, like the board president and the vice president will meet with the superintendent to kind of give a heads up, so that if there were some concerns and they're readily, that she can say, oh, well, here's what I did, you just didn't know that, or something like that. So then so they meet with her ahead of time, then she comes in and talks with the whole board. And that's an opportunity for her to hear all voices. But at the end of that meeting, and if there's some questions about it, and she needs to leave again so that you can come to an agreement. But at the very end, she comes up with the summary document of, here's what the board, feels is one. Now, different superintendents want it different ways. Some superintendents say, I value everyone's opinion, but it's too confusing for me to know all of the different ratings, because it kind of, I don't know what to think about that. So give me one consensus rating. Other superintendents say, I would like to know, just so that I know what's happening. And so that's a discussion that when you start to talk about process that you'll have with Dr. Hines on which she feels comfortable about. But the key is coming up with a consensus document going forward. And I don't know, people are shaking their heads, so you must have done something similar to that?
This is very similar to the process that we've done before.
And I skipped the part about self-assessment, but or self-assessment as the case may be. She talked about that, and that's also crucial, because you don't know all the little things that she's doing on a day-to-day basis, so that's crucial.
I think like most things, the devil's in the details.
Yeah.
And I think that process is pretty much agreed upon by everybody, but we have to have these specifics, and that's really what we're talking about.
And that's for my narrative, mid-year, and then.
Right. So the only thing that I would say is I want to make sure, and Tony addressed this a little bit, so evidence to support growth in goal area. I keep going back to how will you know? And so whether it's specific metrics or just a task or something, I want to make sure that in terms of evidence to support, or the other way around, Superintendent Will, what do you need to know in terms of data or metrics or even qualitative, not necessarily quantitative, but what's going to show you that those are getting done? That's my concern. So,
Well, in this particular area, because it's a very generalized vision area,
Yeah.
I think that we can simply, leave it very general. That, as you'll see in number 2, it gets quite more specific, and I've got much more down in number 2. But I believe I would feel very comfortable asking that the CEC data be analyzed and brought forward and discussed, and the development of the strategic plan, specifically with the intent of utilizing it as the driver for heading the direction of the district in the future, and making certain that it's a moldable, correctable, changeable document. These just those two things are a significant amount of effort and work. So I'm in the vision statement, I think that those two items lay the groundwork for identifying where this district is going in the future. Now, in number 2,
before we go to 2,
well, we're going to get specifics. Now, there is one area here that I think needs to be expanded, and that is monitor district performance and reports to the Board of Education. That one area should be a little bit better defined.
okay.
And for instance, monitor district performance. Suggestions on how to monitor performance? Are you going to give, do you suggest reports on
The map
st-
data.
Exactly.
Roads,
Exactly.
status.
And if that's the case, then we should delineate that. And how many times a year? About 2 times after each map application, or
Well,
3
we're adding, so
times?
mid-year, I would say one of the things that I did was brought about, the reporting out of the fall baseline data. So that was something new that we did.
Okay.
Refer to the report, do the same thing in the spring, although the map report will be after the evaluation, just based on when the evaluation typically takes place.
Is that
So
the?
those would be some examples.
Would there be anything other than the map data that would be relevant to the board as far as performance goes?
Our park assessments, although, this will be the first year we'll have park.
That's
the
gonna be a
TBA and the
toughie.
EOI.
That'll be a toughie.
So I mean, I think that's good, so because
So
we wanna make sure
monitor,
that,
the
yeah.
superintendent will monitor district performance.
By,
Well, of map data in park,
Yeah.
or of map tests in park.
is there anything else that anybody deems relevant that we would like to hear? How about comparisons? How we're doing relevant not only to the national average, but how we're doing relevant to other comparables at the same time. Frankly, I think that kind of goes along the lines that we've been talking about for 2 years, is how do we compare not just to national averages, but how we compare to other high-performing districts that we are constantly comparing ourselves with, financially as well as academically.
And isn't that, I mean, that's kind of really in the roadmap document here, it's sort of laid out, different things about the, student achievement and things of that nature. So I don't know if by reference to that, deploying the roadmap as sort of evidence, that we could just maybe work off the details in the roadmap rather than trying to look to incorporate them, specifically.
You could, but I think what happens if you infer that things that are in the roadmap will be utilized. I think the roadmap is to be, I personally think that the roadmap is to be used as a guide, but I think this evaluation tool, we said lay out the roadmap and implement the roadmap and follow the roadmap, and we can see, okay, you said you're going to do X, Y, and Z, did you do X, Y, and Z? But I think that specifically delineating some of these other things in the evaluation tool that is on top of, you have a roadmap, lay out the roadmap, and what did you do in the roadmap? So I see it as just being more a clearer description. That's why I would add it above and beyond what's written inside of the roadmap.
I don't know what other people think about that.
I guess the only question I have is, we're talking about the vision, and now we're getting into
Into
nuts
data.
and bolts, which I would think would come a little later. So I think these are great comments. I really liked the implementation of the strategic plan. I liked after the CEC, adding the analysis of the data, and then the direction of the strategic plan. I really like that for vision. What is the direction once you get all that information for District 64? Where are we moving, Lori?
Right.
So I get that, but now when we start talking about math scores and all that, to me, that should be in
Number 2.
somewhere
Learning
else
instruction.
other than vision, because I feel like now we're getting into nuts and bolts instead of vision.
Vic, thinking about it, I think you're right. I think maybe that whole thing should be struck and moved into number 2.
The monitor district performance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it should be taken out of there and just moved to number 2. I think you're absolutely right, Vic.
Just as a practical matter, as I recall when we did the strategic plan last time, it was an involved process, and the document that came back was onerous. Down the road, I would hope that we would maybe have something much simpler and more straightforward and so
We will.
forth. But
Concise.
nonetheless, the completion of a strategic plan by April for review has me concerned, because it gives us effectively 6 months for a 1-year review. Is that really practical, that will be done in April? Because there's a lot of parties getting involved in strategic planning, and I know last time, it wasn't a 6-month project
Yeah.
by any means. So I just want to
The process Bobby uses is much less cumbersome than the process Cambridge puts people through. And he feels as though he'll start in January, and he thinks by the end of the spring, in the spring at some point, we will have a strategic plan.
You know, I
For
think
the fall of 15,
For
16.
me, Scott's comment raises, I've been a little concerned about the time frame, just as I read it.
Mhm.
April does strike me as early. If nothing else, the school year is not over. And I know that for some of our staff members, we have to do summative evaluations early because there are deadlines
Right.
that are associated with them. We don't have that issue for your
Do I
evaluation.
have any?
Okay.
Well, according to your policy, I'm guessing you have a policy, most districts do, that you have to do a superintendent evaluation every year. The key to what I think some concerns are is particularly when you have a new superintendent, and here it is almost October before we're
Right.
getting to
Right.
this. Instead of looking at it as a completion, it's progress towards the goal. So
And
in
that's why it says
April,
evidence.
so a year
Growth
from now,
goal
and
area.
in fact, when you go to reevaluate this, you may only end up tweaking it because there's a good chance that Dr. Hines will not be able to actually complete it. You would normally expect her to be able to complete these things in a year. So when it's a first-year superintendent, your evaluation may look more like, is there progress towards this goal? With the understanding that next year it's gonna be, did she meet the goal?
Yeah. The only other thought, I'm sorry, John.
Yeah, even so, I mean, I guess if I had my druthers, I'd probably have at least the board discussion of your evaluation in June.
Yes.
And maybe have you do the self-assessment in late May, at almost the end of the year or so. Not only for the strategic plan, but I'm sure there are some other ways in which it'll just be a more representative evaluation of what you've done during
The
the
only
school
issue
year.
you're gonna have there is April, because there's probably gonna be a couple of different people making an evaluation with 6 weeks' notice as opposed to a year.
This is true.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I agree with you. I was
That's
thinking
true.
it should go to June as well. I was just wondering if with the completion of the strategic plan, and I love a target that's, it's done or not
Yes,
done, it's easy, it's straightforward. That one, I might wanna say, maybe it's our interpretation of significant progress towards.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Just because then that way, we as a group can say, you know what, she's got as much done as you could possibly have done in April. And
Laura-
we feel reasonable. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's a
That's right.
judgment. I don't like leaving them gray like that, but I think this year we might need to, because you're really gonna cut it close with April. I know he's saying he'll have it done in March, but I've been here for a while. I'm guessing it's
May.
not gonna be done on April 1.
I think that makes a lot of sense, Scott. In conversation with Lori, and she's spoken to these people who are gonna
Yeah.
help us conduct this, apparently a lot of the work for the strategic plan is gonna be done in that CEC evaluation.
Oh, good.
And because of that, the strategic plan process will actually be moving at hyperspeed, if you will. But that being said, I think you're absolutely correct. It may very well not be done
Yeah.
by the April timeframe. So the wording would be better situated if it said substantial progress, at least for this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
So
you're
I put
absolutely right.
significant progress towards completion of the
Yeah.
strategic plan.
Exactly. Then this way we know, we're right around the bend. It's,
Yeah.
what's
Okay.
going on. I don't wanna make it nebulous, but I think it's tight, and I do think we wanna evaluate you before the board turns over.
You make a good
Well,
point.
none of you
Scott.
are leaving, right? Isn't that true?
Well, that's up to the voters.
Thank you for saying that, because that just, in every district that I've been working in, we keep talking about the election, and I hadn't even thought about it here, but that's a huge issue.
It's huge.
Because new people are gonna get on, they don't understand, it's hard to bring them up to speed, so you've gotta have that before the election.
So this is good. So that's my only thing, is I just wanted to make sure we weren't too firm there. Where other areas, I'll be more,
Cut and dry.
give me a number.
Yeah.
So
My-
you're
my-
taking off monitor district performance, right?
My
So-
only other
recap
suggestion
one.
for standard one is, in terms of evidence to support growth in the goal area, I don't know if you need to change any text, but for the roadmap, I would like to see the roadmap, with an extra column or so of what actually got done. So that, we know for each of the key action plans, so where'd that end up? And, we may not have each and every one of them done completely, that may be unrealistic given the number of things, but I think, given how important the roadmap is, that's a piece of paper we ought to see as we do your evaluation.
add a column here? I'll add a column and now, just to recap, I'll make sure I captured it. The superintendent will craft and implement district goals, facilitate the development of a 5-year strategic plan, suggest district improvement ideas to the Board of Education, act as spokesperson for the district. So those were some of the ones I thought were important. If you look at the ISLIC standards, are there any others that you think should be there in terms of what I would do if I were a superintendent with vision?
Are you okay with suggest district improvement ideas as kind of understanding what it is you expect?
Well, I would think in the evidence, you would then say, here's
What were
4
the
ideas I
suggestions?
brought forth this year.
Yeah.
And then we could look at it and say, yeah, those are significant ideas that made the difference, yes. I mean, I would think it's in the evidence that we define, that we identify that.
As long as somebody says, what, there's only 4, I would have expected 8.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, that's,
And it depends on scale and scope.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, I wonder whether that's really solvable in advance. You know, I'm always a little skeptical at our ability to bind ourselves, you know, and agree in advance without knowing what the evidence is gonna be.
And sometimes, you're absolutely right, so sometimes it's just having an understanding that different people may have sort of a different threshold on what would be,
Yeah.
evidence
Yeah.
of distinguished. But if we go into this with an understanding that some things, we're not gonna be able to, but if she's, to be really, pinpointed.
Yeah.
But if we're okay with suggest district improvement ideas to the board, and she's done that 4 times, 2 times, 6 times, but nobody's gonna come back and say, I want it 10 times, and that you'll have enough information to be able to go distinguished proficient. And the other thing is, you're rating on all of this.
Right.
So you're gonna take it as a whole. So
Right.
even if there's some differences in opinions in some of that, you're gonna come up with a rating for vision.
And maybe under the evidence, we ought to list as a bullet point, a list of ideas that have been brought forth throughout the year to remind the board of, things, maybe you put that in there, that we would expect some sort of list that says, these are the things I've done, so, I mean, it moves pretty fast, and I got a feeling we're gonna forget a few things that were done in November when we're looking in April, so a list would be helpful to me.
Well, and you'd get that probably during the self-assessment as
Yes,
well.
exactly.
Mid-year, and I've already, there's a
Precisely.
file.
You know,
So I don't, yeah.
one
So
final,
list of improvement,
Just ideas that were brought forth,
suggestions,
yeah,
okay.
a list of some of the ideas brought forth to prove that point, so that we can say, yeah, that was there.
one thing I thought, and it just came to me right now as I'm looking at this vision statement. I've heard over the couple of years that, we do things differently at one school, we do different things at another school. I'm wondering if there should be, and I think maybe there should be, some verbiage applied to a more of a cohesiveness throughout the district. I think you've mentioned that actually in a couple of times, talking about Carpenter does this and they don't do this at Carpenter and they do it at other places and vice versa. I'm not as into it, but I have heard this come out. And I'm wondering if anybody else feels that a movement to strengthen the bonds throughout the district, create more uniformity in expected levels of achievement. Any thoughts on that?
I guess I'm not really ready to put that in as a goal. I don't like centralization for its own sake. I don't find any value in making Carpenter and Franklin do things the same way if there's no other reason than to have them do it the same way. On an individual issue, I could certainly be convinced that it's important that the district do things consistently, but just as a general norm, I tend to like experimentation more than I like centralization. So.
Is there a level, Lori, in going on within the district now, is there that level of experimentation? I absolutely agree with John with one consideration. I think you can do experimentations as long as the output is going to be at the same level. If there's experimentation to the detriment, oh geez, it's not working out, or we've always done this way and everybody's doing it this way, I would think that as best practice, you want to have a certain level of output. And to guarantee that, you're going to have everybody, yeah, you can try a little bit of different here and a little bit of difference there, but ultimately, you're going to have to be doing something along similar lines. So how does that work?
We have, as you know, as the board, we have a board-approved curriculum, and we train our teachers in the same way, and with the Common Core, they told us what standards, what kids needed to know and be able to do. Local control was reserved in terms of how we get the kids there. We've made decisions as a district to focus on high-impact instruction and the 7 strategies of assessment for student learning. So there is a level of standardization and a common, you said best practice, common methodology that we're trying to bring to the district, but we do give teachers autonomy within their school day as well to figure out the best way to get the kids engaged. You know, I think about the technology initiative. We haven't really clearly identified exactly how to use the technology. We're giving teachers creative license in that regard, although we are providing them with jumpstart training and the coaches are working closely with them. We don't want to be so prescriptive that teachers don't get to make choices. So I think we have a little bit of both going on, and I think it's a good thing. You know, to have certain things that we're all focusing on, common language, common understanding, but then at the end of the day, giving teachers some choice.
And I agree with that. It's just that, do you feel that there is enough standardization across the district, and there's no further need to provide any of that?
From the limited interaction that I've had in the first month here with actually teachers and kids in the building, you know, I don't know that I have a real strong sense one way or another. I know there are differences. There are things that make each school unique, but then the principals communicate together. We talk at AC. There are times where we want to be really tight and together and in sync, and other times where we want to be a little bit loose. So for right now,
How about maybe this is something that,
yeah, I can.
for next year?
Yeah, I think I might have a better sense after
Yeah.
spending a year in the schools and really getting to know the teachers and the curriculum and
I think when they do this
But then-
CEC study,
Yep.
you're gonna, and when we start looking at the MAP results and the PARC assessments,
Mhm.
you're gonna be able to clearly see, I mean, I hate to say this, but you're gonna see certain classrooms, you're gonna see certain teachers in certain classrooms, you're gonna see in certain buildings. So you're gonna have so much data after this year that, you know, I would hate to put that in the first year document. Things are gonna come out, and you're gonna find out if it's an issue.
But thinking of, yeah, 4 weeks with kids here, I still
Yeah.
don't know if I can decide.
So that's an hour on standard 1, right?
Right, oh boy, yeah, yeah.
Actually,
So-
I think 5, 6, and 7 are going to move pretty quick. 2 might take a bit of time. If everybody's comfortable with 1, we can move to number 2, learning and instruction. Barb, do you have anything you'd like to start off with?
This was the only thing that, well, actually, in the
So you did
evidence,
have a-
the student, my personal opinion is the superintendent will, I think because it's in her roadmap and also in the performance contract, my personal opinion is you need to see student growth in the superintendent will. I don't know that it's enough to just say implement use of students and growth tests for high performing norms in the evidence, but that's up to the board.
So do you have language
No.
that you suggest?
No. You're the
Superintendent
you're
will.
the good language person.
Well, I think something simple stating that we will see continuous positive student growth.
How about something like the superintendent will drive growth in measures of student performance?
But we want to see that scale going up like this.
Sure.
Drive
Yeah, right,
growth.
but the idea is the superintendent will drive
Growth.
growth
Growth.
in measures of student performance.
Yeah. You know,
And then
one.
the evidence, in the evidence, you'll have to see that evidence, which is number
Right.
1 in, well, that says implement use of status and growth, so I think you'll need to see in
And
the
that's a whole
evidence.
new way that we're looking at data and using data, so that seems like a measly little bullet point, but it's actually
no,
a
I-
massive
I
undertaking.
really, in your roadmap, I really like 1D. will maintain competitive performance within 10 percentage points of the benchmark of the district, blah, blah, blah. That's really here what I want to see. Now, I understand that test scores you don't want to teach. I understand our philosophy there, but I do think in the evaluation of a superintendent, a metric that says our scores out there are going to be, I know they're going to go up or down a little bit, but within this boundary or whatever, you know, to the plus this way, to the minus that way, I don't really feel is a bad idea.
Right. I agree with
You
you.
know what I mean?
There's
I
gotta be
like
some
this B where
specifics.
it's, you know, you're gonna keep, either it's our math scores or our partial, whatever we decide that is, within 10% of at least where they are, if that's sufficient, or if we wanna have a different target, and we can debate what that is. But I'd like to have something to hang our hats on that's quantifiable. And again, it's one point among many, but I think
Right.
it moves us a lot more in the direction of things are quantifiable by doing so. So
So-
throwing something like that in here, however you think it would be fair, is something I'd be interested in.
So the second bullet was, we have the first is implement use of status and growth setting targets against high-performing norms. Then the next one was progress towards status and growth targets in 2014-15, because it's our baseline year. Measuring data in a different way, using data and measuring it in a different way. Then, so am I keeping bullet 2, or am I replacing it with maintain current competitive performance within 10 percentage points relative to top performing benchmark districts and
I think
states?
what Scott said, in other words, the idea of putting 1D into the evaluation, if I were gonna put it somewhere, I'd put it in the superintendent will.
Right.
I would not put that in the evidence.
Okay.
You know, if we're serious
Yeah.
about that, then I think that goes in, one of the things we want you to do is that.
Right.
And, and then I suppose the evidence of it is you get the scores, and the scores of some high-performing districts so that we can see that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Within 10 percentage points of relative high-performing districts, I think is a fair goal to judge you on, and we can give you distinguished when it exceeds by far amounts, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's,
And I would suggest that both the more general goal that I suggested and Scott's more specific goal go in. And part of the reason is that the more general one talks about growth.
Right.
The more specific one is a maintain goal.
right.
Right.
And so I would think we would like to, it's kind of the net and then move into beyond it.
Okay.
And this, by the way, just in fairness, this is, I think, is something where when we do an evaluation, certainly in April of this year, we're gonna be looking at progress toward that. I don't, just to be clear, don't think
Right.
that you're gonna wave some magic wand in between now and April, and we're gonna suddenly find that our student scores on various measures are a lot higher than they were last year. But
What? Well, we hired her. That's the whole point of the interview process last year.
And I also think something that Scott, that you said was key, is that's gonna be one piece
Right.
of learning and instruction. So I think that's an important thing,
Right.
and you mentioned it, but I just thought, because if she doesn't make it, even if in the second year, it's one piece of measuring.
And in this area, and I don't mean to dominate here, one other thing that I always hear is the best way, the administration historically has always articulated that one of the best ways to really affect student growth is through professional development. And my understanding of required professional development versus optional versus, if we're gonna put this one-to-one thing, do they have to go there or they're docked pay? I'm not really sure how that works in the district, and I'd like to understand that going forward. But what I would like to see is maybe a metric we could put in here is maybe attendance at some of this stuff. Or, because that's a good way to say, look, if you're telling me the quickest and shortest path to getting the students to be better is to train the teachers in effective teaching techniques, well, how are we getting the teachers to those things? And as a superintendent, whatever motivational strategy you come up with, I'd like to see the growth in attendance in that. So that would be a metric in, I'm not sure where it is now and what's the benchmark for where to go forward, but that may be one I'd like to see. I mean, because I don't think we can just say on every wacky Wednesday, you're gonna be at, this class, right? I mean, whatever, I know there's some leeway there, and I'm not sure I understand it all, but maybe if you could think through something like that.
Along that line, I had written down here, plan to implement staff support plan and base competency. And the corollary to that is, if this is important, how do we get their interest to attend these things?
Right.
You're absolutely right. So I would like, along those lines, I don't know exactly how to craft it, but I would like to see data In fact, we had some data about 2.5 years ago. There was about 33% participation in some of these things, and that's not cutting it. But we can't, in some areas, we can't necessarily force folks. In some areas, I think we can mandate some things. And with you, I don't know the difference in the areas that we can and can't. But I would like to see the data of participation in this along both of the items that we said.
I'd like to see that growing, because if we're spending a lot of money on professional development, especially on the one-to-one initiative, right? I mean, we're throwing a lot of dough in.
Yeah.
And if people just aren't even attending, now, whether they're comprehending, I'm gonna have a harder time measuring, but at least if they're attending,
Right.
it's the start.
Right.
And so for the first year or two, I'd like to see that attendance grow.
So
So
base
that would go
competency.
under evidence.
As evidence, exactly.
Evidence.
Evidence would be growth in attendance from last year to this year.
Well,
Exactly.
just
We
to be
know what the
devil's
people attended
advocate,
last year.
do they, per their contract, they have to attend those sessions?
Well, and I guess what I would
So
say
that's
is,
not fair.
at this point, I'd say we don't need to worry about that, because, let's say they don't have to. Let's say they never have to, and they don't do it. And the question is, well, why don't they do it? Well, one reason they don't do it is they don't find it relevant.
Right.
So one thing that our administration can be doing is making sure the professional development is more relevant, so that it's the kind of thing where they think, my God, I gotta get there, this is important, this is useful. And so if that were happening, I would expect to see the attendance go up. So the attendance could either go up because we're forcing people to go, it could go up because we're providing better professional development offerings, but one way or the other, we ought to be seeing it go up.
Yes, and ideally the latter. I'd rather it be that they're inspired to go, because
Right.
we're doing outstanding things, and that would, again, it's one data point, and it's something quantifiable that, we're always striving as a group, what's a number we can measure, because it's been so nebulous and so subjective. These are just a few points that I was thinking as I read through this over the last couple of days.
I don't wanna be devil's advocate, but I just know from, studies and surveys, some people love to go to stuff like that. Some people are overachievers, and they're gonna go to those classes no matter what she offers. So, but there's gonna be people that say, it's not my contract, I don't have to go, I'm not doing it. So, you can't force that person to go.
I think we're
And it could be the most interesting topic of the year.
And Vicki, I don't think anybody's saying that Lori will get a bad evaluation if 100% of teachers don't go to professional development. I think the idea is just simply one thing to look at in how we're doing on learning and instruction is how many people are going to professional development, and is it getting better?
If it was 33% last year,
And
and this year it's 42%, I'd be saying,
That's
good.
this is where, this is the direction we wanna go in. That's all I'm looking for. I'm not looking for if she doesn't get to 80%, we penalize her. I'm
Right.
looking for growth in what we started with.
And
Right.
you might get to a point where then we have to expand that conversation and start including some other folks.
Right. And with contractor coming up, we might wanna think
Exactly.
about a little bit about, hey guys, if we're spending this money on you, we need a commitment on the other side of the table that
Exactly.
you're gonna be attending.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
I'd just like to see our money in that category spent well.
Exactly.
One of the things, there's a Lighthouse study that talks about what districts and what boards particularly do in high-performing districts. And one of the things that they do is that the boards are aware of the professional development and how that professional development links to their district goals. So one of the things, if you want to do attendance, I think I think as long as this board is understanding, don't forget, another board's gonna come in and they're gonna say, look, 33% is not okay. But I understand why you wanna put it, I'm not saying you shouldn't. But one of the things I think that's even more important is that the board understand what is being offered.
Yes.
And how that links. Because research shows that when the board sees the professional development is linking to the district goals, that creates a high-performing district. So, I think attendance is great, but I think what's even more important is that you should have a list of all the professional development opportunities for the teachers, and then how those link.
Well, I think, Barb, that's a great point. I think that we need to be shown
Yep.
how the programs do link to the strategic plan and what the plan going forward would be for these continuing development programs. So that would require a presentation in and by itself. And I'd like to see that. Of course, I imagine you would do that in the beginning and the end of the year. This is what we have, this is what we're going to do, and at the end of the year, this is the results. This was our attendance, this was the effect. So maybe that could be one of the bullet points. is a presentation on this.
You know, and to kind of go along with it, because I want to make sure the teachers are heard as well. Do we, after our professional development initiatives, do we survey the teachers? Do we get feedback from them or annually say, you know, how effective is professional development on a scale of 1 to 10?
We do.
There is.
We do. So that may be something too as a scoring metric to say, have the teachers say,
That's
was
probably a
this
better metric
an
than a
effective
ten.
way
guys
of doing
looking
it?
for? What do you
Yeah.
need from
Right, you know,
us?
on a scale of 1 to 10, are you finding it
Yeah.
We
effective?
need less
And let's say we
guidance.
want an 8 for a 3 and a better for a 4. You know, I mean, something akin to
Well,
that.
to do that properly though, because if you just, the people who show, if only 33%
Right, I
show
think
up,
we need both.
yeah, you got to get the people in general population as well as the people who
Right.
show
I'd like
up.
to see people attending more, and I'd like them to find it more relevant. And over time, I'd like to see both of them
Exactly,
increase.
exactly.
That would be ideal.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Yeah, just butts in the seats doesn't always do it. But again, we're just looking for simple metrics so that we can have an articulate
Yes,
Discussion.
discussion.
scoring on this one, that's all.
Exactly. You know, does that capture that? Because the next concept would be, and I was speaking with Lori, and I was amazed to find out that we have all these maps, and we're doing something very unique this year. There's going to be an analysis of the map data. Now, I guess there always has been an analysis, correct?
Are you talking about the fall baseline?
Yes.
Yes.
So this analysis going forward of the current data, maybe you can describe how that's going to be different this year versus previous years, and how what we're going to do with that data, and if you believe that that could be placed into the superintendent will category.
Right, so what I've added already I moved it from standard 1, was monitor district performance through analysis of map and park results. So something new this year is, we've always administered map in the fall. You've just never been given a baseline report right after, you know, the assessments have been administered to know where did the students come in at each grade level in the fall. And then the work that Dr. Lopez has been doing with the schools in terms of how to use the data, what's the difference between status, what's the difference between growth, in that presentation that she did for you. She's modified that down for the principals, and the principals have been having those data conversations with their staff. MAP has gone, kids have finished MAP, I think the makeups were just at the end of the week, and they're gonna start diving into those data, with the data that's available, and using it to do some goal setting. So that's a big, you know, multi-year, you know, all year long process. It's gonna take us several years to get good, but some of the conversations I've been having with teachers in PREA when wondering why, you know, all this focus on data, I said, we're gonna spend the next 2 years getting really good at how to use data, because by the time 2016-17 comes, when it counts as a 25, which will then eventually be 30% of their evaluation, you really wanna be good and have a solid understanding on how to use data and how to make instructional decisions with that data. So we're gonna use this 2 years to get very good at looking at and setting growth targets for kids individually and as grade levels in schools. So that's the big work of the next couple of years. So from my perspective, I'm gonna monitor that performance, but I'm also helping to develop those protocols with Lori, and I'm kind of in the trenches with that development.
But that's
So I'm gonna figure out
how to word that.
into
Exactly.
this document, which is,
Exactly.
it's hard. Those are things, and I guess part of this where I'm sitting back and just listening is, I don't know that we can put a bullet point for every single thing that I'm gonna do, and that there's gonna be a bullet for every, you know, way to measure it. But I know that you're gonna need some reading glasses when it comes time for me to give you my narrative, you know, mid-year and end of the year, in terms of all the things that have happened. Because it's in that anecdotal realm that I'm gonna really be able to create the picture of how we've spent the year.
But just by your explanation, you're analyzing, your people and you are analyzing the map data, and you're giving it to the principals to work with their classroom. So that is using the results and implementing a strategy.
Right.
So already you're tackling one.
And to me, I always feel, you know, the anecdotal it really paints the picture. I don't want you to think that I don't think we need numbers too, but the anecdotal is where you're really gonna get a deep, in my mind, a deep sense of what I've been working on.
But that being said, how does that link to the bullet points that we have here. It doesn't have to link, in my mind, word for word, but how does it link up to what we have here
For the
already?
student's will or the evidence?
Both.
For the superintendent will?
No, the evidence, the superintendent will, the
We
will,
have the
will.
implement use of status and growth, progress towards status and growth, support facilitation, then that's the technology initiative, and then monitor professional development participation rates and track growth over time. That's, something that I added. So those are things that I can look and tangibly say to you, were these done? Kind of back to, how did this go? Did we implement the use of status and growth setting targets this year? Yep, we're already diving in. Fourth week of school, actually started last week. Hopefully the data is gonna show that there's been progress made in the areas of status and growth. Because remember, Lori went back and used the spring data, and then we'll have last spring and this spring to see, did we see any movement in those areas?
Would it be safe to say under item number 5, use multiple sources of data to monitor impact in the instructor program, that whole idea of doing the analysis of the map and moving forward, would that sentence, you think it would fall under that?
I do, what do you guys think?
And if it does, I'm okay. I'm totally okay with that, as long as that general statement, if that statement is not too general, then it can suffice to answer exactly what I'm talking about. But if it's too general, then I would say use multiple sources of data, including map analysis, to monitor impact instructional program. Just those two words, including map analysis.
Using multiple sources of data, including map?
Map analysis, yeah, because it's different this year. Your analysis this year will seemingly be different than what had been done in the past, and I want to make sure that is going to continue.
Now, there's a lot of bullets under the superintendent will. Do any seem redundant? Are there any you think we could get rid of to kind of collapse this? Any you'd like to add? Any feedback there?
I guess.
I mean, this is the meat and potatoes to me of the job.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with all the bullets, but I want you guys to let me know.
I am too. I agree some of them are overlapping, but that's okay.
Number 4 kind of goes back to what I had said previously, ensure alignment of curriculum instruction and assessment. Kind of when I was talking before about district-wide, and
Right.
this is, actually you have it here, I didn't even realize it was there. But that pretty much would cover that goal toward maintaining some level of uniformity throughout then.
Yeah, and to the extent that's what we're talking about in uniformity, I've got no problem with what's in that bullet.
And that's one of the things that the CEC will really tease out when they take that district look.
Right.
Is, where are we in sync, and if we're off, too much in one direction or another place, I
schools
think.
you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually,
School
I
review system
I
assessment.
saw some reports that had happened from the system assessment. I mean, and the reality of it is, different schools have different populations who have different needs, and so there are going to be different ways that the schools need to address those needs, and it may very well be that, while we have high expectations of all schools, you may see some differences, and you just know that. I was thinking, and this is really a picky point, but as I'm listening to you have a conversation, I think to make the document more conducive to conversation, the superintendent will, I think those need to be numbers. Because I noticed you're doing that, Tony.
I'm counting bullets when you
Yeah,
start.
and I think it needs to be numbers.
Sure.
And understanding, of course, there's no priority, but it helps in the conversation. Because it's like, well, that one that says promote use of, instead of saying, number 7 or whatever. So I think
Or
that's just,
A, B, C, D.
oh, yeah, whatever, just something to be able to refer to it
Sure.
might be a good idea. I don't care if it's numbers or it's letters or.
Lori, do you, as you mentioned, this is the nuts and bolts really of what a educational superintendent leader would be. Do you think that, I think this is a good start, it very clearly delineates things, but do you feel that the metrics that are listed here will be sufficient, more than sufficient, at least for the first year? And does anybody on the board feel that they would want to see a better defined or more defined metric evaluation?
I mean, those are the big ones we use to monitor progress. I'll have to think about that, but I don't know if there are any other.
And I'm comfortable with what I'm seeing in the evidence, especially with the idea that Lori in her self-evaluation is always free to bring us more evidence that we didn't think of in advance. And and she has every motivation to do so.
Oh, I will.
So,
Trust me.
Well, the way I look at it is that we want to monitor student growth that's in there, and how is student growth delivered by staff, and we've just added something on staff to assess the staff's participation. So I think we've kind of got quite a bit covered here.
Good.
Alrighty, then that allows us the opportunity to move on to standard 3, organization, finance, and facilities. I have one question here. Evidence to demonstrate growth in a gold area. Laura, you're going to have to help define something. There's a master facility audit, there's a master facility plan, there's a building plan. I'm
Right.
confused.
So they're all the same, they're interchangeable. So what we would like to do is a master facility audit, and then the results of the audit are turned into a master facility plan.
What is the difference?
Well, the audit is when an outside party or outside parties come in and, kind of walk the district and give us a general feedback in terms of the overall health of the facilities, recommendations from HVC to educational adequacy, space, you name it, they do that. And then just like we have a multi-year maintenance, master maintenance plan, we would have a master facility plan that encompasses all 8 of our schools.
if I remember correctly, when we started off a couple years ago on the idea of coming up with a facility master plan, we were told that the maintenance plan was sort of the first step in that. And so we got a maintenance plan with a list of projects and stuff like that. What we didn't do at the time was what I think was sometimes called phase 2 of the facility master plan, and that was the educational adequacy assessment. So I say that, I guess, for 2 reasons. One, Lori, so that if I'm remembering wrong, you can tell me. But second, ask the question, what you just said, is that consistent with the same stuff that we thought we needed as what was left over?
Master
or is
facility
there some
plan's
new
more
thinking?
comprehensive. Educational adequacy is one piece of it.
Right.
And I actually would have started, had I been here years back, I would have started with the master facility plan, the maintenance, the preventative maintenance, 10-year life safety, educational adequacy, all of those things kind of come under that larger umbrella, which is the master facility plan or audit.
Which is what we did. We just had some big bleeders, so we decided we were gonna tackle a few things first
And then
and put this
finish.
there, but when you're saying it, I was thinking, we've kind of done this, we just haven't done the second phase of it. If we do the second phase, have we accomplished what you were trying to achieve here?
Right.
Not in the conversations that I've had with Scott, I don't think so.
I mean, I have a document in my file cabinet called Facility Master Plan that's got
You sure it's not maintenance? Because the one I had
it's
is,
the Facility Master Plan.
Yeah.
No, it's the maintenance plan, because
Well, that was phase 1 that was
Yeah,
completed.
we do have a maintenance plan,
Right.
but we have more than just a
Yes.
maintenance plan. And we certainly do not have a complete facility
Right.
master plan. There were pieces missing, but I guess one thing to look at is, are the pieces that you see as missing still the same pieces that we thought a couple years ago were left over?
okay.
Or is there a need to redo anything that we
Sure.
did within the last couple of years, et cetera? That,
Okay.
Right.
I'd kind of like to understand better.
I know that Scott and I were talking.
It's on, one of the agendas coming up.
And Scott has, told me that ultimately we want to have a plan
Right.
that you lay out. You can say, okay, 7 years from now, that roof is going to have to be replaced in that year, and it's a budgetary alignment. And then 8 years, something else, 9 years. So everything is mapped out building-wise across. And I thought that was a master maintenance plan, but that's part of the master facility plan. And I know that the adequacy study is also part of the master facility plan.
Right.
And I believe the document that we had that he was talking about was a maintenance plan.
That's my
And-
understanding as well.
And it's not quite
That's good.
nearly as comprehensive, and we haven't evolved to the point where that everything is mapped out and laid out, because the whole picture is not in focus yet.
Yeah,
So
it's
what-
my understanding that we embarked upon a project that was to do a facility master plan, as you say, and that we did some components, roughly 50%, and maybe 40% of it is this maintenance plan you're talking about, but we did other things as well.
Right.
And then the idea was, now what we're gonna come back to is we need an educational adequacy studies, but we also need long-term planning for the facilities and assets, because I mean, I can even remember specifically raising the questions about are middle schools necessary? Could you build on this? I mean, do we want to have as many assets as we have 40 years from now? Will these buildings survive 40? I think that was the part that was the second part of this that still needed to be done, as well as millions of other questions. But I believe one source we may want to really go to is we might want to go to the architect and have a conversation with them as well in some detail, because I mean, we put that together, right? I mean, and they have a real good checklist of what they've done and what they haven't and what they really wanted to do, because through the architectural selection process, this was part of what we kind of went through. So again, I think there's just maybe in nomenclature we're having some terminology differences or something. We might want to dive into that before we say you'll have something done today. You know
Right,
what I mean?
so what I'm looking at the board agenda items that, you know, Tony and I work off of when we meet and talk about the agendas. We have down to November or December to start this conversation. If we're gonna go the route of, you know, master facility study, or, so maybe we can move that up into November to have a conversation about exactly what has been done, because we're really booked in October, we have busy agendas. So I can add it to, November, and then what would a master facility plan entail?
Well, I think the way to start that is, what is the ultimate document that we need to have? And if that's a master facility plan, then what are the subcomponents of that? And let's start checking them off and let's get that accomplished.
Okay.
Yeah, a gap analysis of what you have so far, what you
Yeah.
need would be useful with the help of the architect, because I mean, they went and explored every building, and we spent a
Okay.
ton of dough for them to inspect everything upside down.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, so a lot of this work, I'd hate to like all of a sudden
Sure.
spend taxpayer dollars on doing that again when it was
Right.
done in the last couple of years.
It was about $600,000, wasn't it?
Well,
Ooh.
Maybe
that was the
not
whole
that
project.
much, but it was,
Couple on, maybe 150.
All right,
More
so I've
than-
added it
yeah.
as a discussion point,
Yeah.
discussion item in November.
In this area, turning it just a little bit, one thing I've always wished for, I think John, you've mentioned it as well, I think Tony, you've mentioned it as well. That forecast model we have is one of the most important things in my mind. And any time we're going to embark upon a project that involves any dough, I'm looking to say, how does it move that little curve I'm looking at all the time? Does it move it out or move it in? And I've been a little frustrated in that we spent money on a new tool, I didn't even know we were really kind of doing and all that, right? We had an old tool that was supposed to be easy to update, now we got a new tool. And an answer I'm getting back is, I can only do that a
Twice
couple
a year.
times a year.
Yeah.
I gotta be honest with you, I would love to give you a goal that I want it either monthly or bi-monthly, or I want it with any decision over $50,000. I want what that impact is on the forecast, because that can move the needle of, do we make 2021 or do we make 2018?
Right.
You know, and those are the kind of things, I think, we gotta have a goal that maybe by the end of the year, that tool is ready for the board at greater intervals than twice a year.
And maybe, and I only thing I'd suggest, and had some interaction with Becky and Dan, is that, you know, I don't know if that tool is as fantastically great as you might believe it is. If you just look at from July when we did our budget meeting until just the past meeting, if you looked at that, the latter couple of years changed by almost 50% of days cash in hand. And when I asked for an explanation, in my words, the explanation wasn't complete and analytical. It was just, well, we finished out this year better than we thought. And it's like, well, but how could you change your days cash in hand by 50%, you know, and not know that? So I agree conceptually. I don't know if, I'd like to understand that tool a little better, because I don't know exactly everything that's going into that.
You know, this kind of goes a little bit along what I had mentioned at the other meeting, last meeting, when I said that the board's participation in the hiring of the new finance director is important, because I believe it's the board's position to set what we want going forward. And if we want those kinds of reportings, and if we want to know where that line is coming down, I mean, we have to find a way to get this data.
Well, I think the way to do that is in this document, because see, where I disagree with you, Tony, I think we've got no role in hiring the finance director. Lori does.
I know, you've mentioned
But
that.
but our role is telling Lori we want this stuff.
Yes.
And
Right,
If
Lori,
another tool is the answer.
Right, and if you
Right.
remember at the last board meeting, I said, I said ultimately, what I would like to see, and I, talked with Becky and I've talked with MJ about this, and Allison, listen up too, because she might be in on this. I would like to see the dashboard modified, make it a true dashboard,
Yep.
and have it electronic, so it can be more responsive when things change. Now, I don't know, kind of like the Wizard of Oz, the guy behind the curtain, exactly how to make that work, but that's a conversation, that we're gonna have with, the, website company, and to see if there's a way to make that functionality electronic.
It's like an Excel
I
spreadsheet.
don't disagree with that, I think that's a very good idea.
Mhm.
But like, yeah, I sit on my company's investment committee, and when we're gonna put a lot of money out to play, we're gonna look at how it impacts the entire company. Now, whether the tool's right or wrong, I'm not a financial expert to guess in the district, but, and so I would love to see improvements in it. But I do think when we're talking about key initiatives that sometimes are 300,000, 500,000, it's capital stuff, it moves that needle on days cash on hand. I think we need to maybe have a goal that by next year, we have a tool that, not only do we have the dashboard that tells you every month what it is, but when you propose something new that's of significance, you can throw that in and we can see the impact in terms of what one of our, probably the metric we're looking at, our speedometer is that referendum.
So to put that in terms, you might say that, Lori, you're going to be tasked with developing a tool that can be utilized to accurately project the impact of financial decisions on long-term what, Scott?
well,
Long-term financial position?
here's what I might propose in here. I might propose a bullet under the superintendent will, and then another item under the evidence. And the item I would put under the superintendent will, I would put something like, the superintendent will ensure that all budgets and spending decisions are consistent with not needing a referendum before 2021. That's the substantive goal.
It's general enough,
Putting
yeah.
aside the data and the pieces of paper, that's what we want. We want not to be back at referendum until 2021 at the earliest. And then under evidence, I would put, have a robust tool that can be used to evaluate the impact of any decision on the 2021 goal.
It's a good way of putting it.
Develop a robust tool to evaluate the impact of expenditures on
The
A real
2021
time.
goal.
Real time.
21.
And I agree with Scott that I think it's
Referendum.
really important to have a tool that can be used before we spend the money and not just find out about it in September with the fine, here's what you decided, oh, and by the way,
Right.
here's the impact you had on 2021. You need to know before.
Yeah, and I agree with what you said earlier, Scott, so I'm sorry about that.
No.
Caught up in the tool thing. Do we wanna mention, for the superintendent, do we wanna mention the referendum thing there? Seeing that every large major expense, I would imagine, would have to come through the board, should it really be more of our, let the superintendent suggest things and let the board sort of make the decision whether we.
Yeah, I'm kind of in agreement with you, because you may have found something in 3 months that is the greatest thing that could move everybody up in education. Not that you will, but I'm saying, I'd hate for you not to be inclined to do it because you don't wanna miss that goal. I think I see where you're saying, where maybe it is the board's goal.
Our responsibility may be more to try to think about the referendum, because it would have to be a huge project, I imagine, for that to take on, sort of significance.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to see us give clear direction, and if we've held it as one of our goals to not go back to referendum for 2020, until 2021, I think it makes sense to tell the superintendent, we expect you to give us stuff that keeps us from going back, until
You have to
2021.
realize that there's a good likelihood that not one of you will still be on the board in 2020.
Yes, this
Yeah,
just is
so-
history. This was a goal set in 2007 for 2017, and it
They're
was
pushing
set
it
at the
further.
time we
Oh.
were at referendum. So those
Oh.
on the board and campaigning for the referendum said, vote for this, and we will not be back for 10 years.
We've tried to
And then
honor it.
recently, we've added 4 years to it.
Okay.
So that, there is some desire to,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, you have past practice of
Bind.
saying those dates.
Yeah,
Future board
it is
members.
past practice.
Yeah.
The, so have we used John's words there, or
Yeah,
can
I'm
you,
different. I just would like to see that.
Can I hear
that
it?
tool more than twice a year.
can I hear,
There you go.
I agree.
Lori, can you repeat?
So I have ensure all budget and spending decisions are consistent with the 2020, 2021 referendum.
Yeah, I might
Is that-
be even clearer, say are
Okay.
consistent with not needing a referendum before 2021.
Okay,
Can you repeat that one more
sure.
time?
Ensure all budget and spending decisions are consistent with not needing a referendum before 2020, 2021.
Well, wait a minute. That implies that if there's an educational initiative that may, who knows, something may come up, that you deem to be, boy, I'd love to be able to do this. But if it goes against this, and it's gonna cost some money, and it might lop a year off of something, that means that the educational initiative is done because the overriding concern is extending to 21.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if
It
that's.
absolutely does. I mean, and the idea is, we said, you know, a good year ago at one of our retreats, that, you know, we were serious about this goal. This was one of our key goals. So I have no problem writing this into the superintendent's goals. Now, I mean, if there really is something that's the greatest thing since sliced bread,
Right.
and it shaves 1 year off, I imagine Lori will come to us anyway and
Right.
say, you know, I'm not gonna recommend this to you unless you change your policy, but I want you to know that there's this opportunity out here to do something great, but in order to do it, you're gonna need to change your policy.
But I think the wording has to reflect that, and I think that wording,
Yeah.
does not allow for that. That's only my,
The wording doesn't prohibit her from seeking the change in her own evaluation goals or in the board's goals. But I think we ought to be clear. If that is one of the key things that we have said to the taxpayers, we ought to be clear and say that clearly to our superintendent.
The other thing to consider, though, is that, you know, goal 2, you have some really, you know, you've got some goals in terms of student growth and all this. So, again, if you, I'm not saying one thing or another, I just want you to be aware that if, and like you said, if she's gonna be allowed to come, well, not allowed, but if she feels comfortable coming to you and saying, well, I know this is a huge expenditure and it might push it a year closer, but, and you say no, but you've still got these other goals that are requiring it to exist, I just don't wanna see competing, you know, it's the age-old thing, and you know this. Where do you put your emphasis? Do you put it on students learning, or do you put it on finances? And there's never one right answer. So I think we have to be careful. The other thing, and I know you've done this in 2017, it's just so a lot can happen. So, you know, she could go back and not recommend this really good thing, and the board would say, oh, it looks like we push us over into 2021, and so we're not gonna do it, or before 2021, and then lo and behold, you get this huge windfall from the state. Yeah, right, I know, but still, something unforeseen happens, and you have all this money, and you go back and you go, oh, we could have done that, except we were so worried about what's gonna happen
Right.
in, you know, 7 years from now, 6 years.
And I agree, this is the quintessential policy decision.
Mhm, right.
You know, and, you know, I guess this is one issue that I have felt strongly about since I've been on the board. I was elected the same year as the referendum, and, you know, this was one of the things that I stood at coffees and told taxpayers. And so, you know, I've always kind of viewed it as one of my number one jobs as a board member is to make sure that we fulfilled that. And I sure didn't want to be standing up doing a coffee for, you know, explaining why we're back earlier than we said we were.
I would like to use some words that John once said in an open meeting, and I would feel more comfortable if this was expanded to include something to be like this, that every attempt be made to maintain the 2021 extension on the referendum, and if any new initiatives are brought to the board, that a recommendation for offsets be made to maintain that. So that allows you to find something that would be wonderful, and yet there are some offsets that can be made to make it a doable thing. Just some caveat to allow for the possibility of new initiatives and yet some offset somewhere to maintain the 2021 school year. It seems to me that there has to be some allowance, and I think in John, you've mentioned yourself that where's the trade-off? Where's the offset?
I'm always open to trade-offs.
Yes.
You know, and I have no problem if you wanna play with that wording a little bit. I would just prefer to be pretty clear. that,
Absolutely.
you
So
know,
what happens,
we
like,
expect
what happens in, using Vicky's term of devil's advocate or something, what happens if we were just talking about this master facility plan, so what happens if we develop
Massive
that?
expenditure.
And that suggests expertly that we do something that would require a change that would be a lot. So would Lori look at that and go, oh, I have to go back to whoever's developing this plan, and tell them, you're gonna have to change it, cause that tips over in the money wise, so we don't even wanna
It's
talk about
patchwork
that.
instead of-
Do
Yeah.
I wanna prevent, do we wanna prevent her from bringing something forward cause you're worried about the referendum, or should it just come forward and then we'll decide if that's something to move forward with?
You know,
I mean, believe me, I'm all for
Yeah.
maintaining the commitment to the referendum.
That's kind of what I'm saying.
But,
Right.
but you're talking about maintaining the commitment to the referendum plus.
The addendum.
Yeah.
To me, there's a difference here. I kind of look at it as like this, like we have a goal of getting 2021. And if something, and that is what we know now, we think we can get there, and in good faith say that's our goal. I believe we have a almost contract for 2017.
Oh,
And I would say, I'd be comfortable putting language in there that we won't do anything that gets us before 2017 as our goal, as hers, but 21, like honestly, if the facility master plan comes back and says, guys, you're in a lot of trouble, this has gotta be fixed, I have no problem going back to my constituents saying, it's now 2020, sorry, I got you 3 years more than you did, I think that's still
okay,
pretty good.
13 years.
You see what I'm saying, John? That's why
Right.
I see a difference in the two.
I mean, I might suggest maybe Lori takes a stab at some language offline, you know, and I'm not gonna fall on my sword over the exact language on this, but it seems to me, I'd like something clear that says, we expect 2021, damn it.
Yeah.
And, you know, and if something comes up that you can't get 2021, well, then of course, come back and say to the board, but come back knowing that this is gonna be one of the bigger decisions the board has made in a while, to abandon that commitment. And, I think as long as that's clear, that that's the expectation, you know, I'm not too concerned with the wording around it.
I think we're all pretty much in agreement that we do want to extend it to 2021, as John is saying, and it should be stated. I think what the three of us at least are saying is that there has to be some flexibility. We don't want to prevent you from
Right.
bringing something to the board.
From doing standard 2,
Exactly.
which is, you know, teaching and learning.
Well, although I think we are, or at least I am, saying that as you weigh standard 2 and standard 3, you know, there's, you know, I want 2021 on. So I also would like to note for the record the irony of perhaps being the hard case a little bit on this particular board on this issue, rather than, as I usually am, the guy arguing for more flexibility. So we'll take a little bit of pleasure in that. We can move on.
So I will finesse the language, but
Yeah.
it'll be 2020, 21. Determine need for implementation, master facility plan, so I put that in there. Change that a little bit, I'll follow up with Scott, and we'll talk about it at an upcoming board meeting.
Okay.
And then develop a robust tool to evaluate impact of expenditures on 2021, 2021 referendum goal.
Yeah, the
Any-
forecast is key.
Yeah, okay?
Mhm.
Anything else for standard 3?
No, I think what goes unsaid there is the continual movement of the things that we're doing, the dashboard development and more financial reporting and things like that. I mean, that's all, at this point, it's pretty much expected.
Okay.
Yeah.
2 and 45 minutes, Bob, we're picking up the pace.
Yep. Next item, standard 4 ethics. I frankly have nothing to add to this. It's pretty straightforward. Anything that we have learned in the last year and a half or so, for us old-time board members, anything you'd like to add in there? I think we have enough policy
Yeah.
to back up any, yeah.
So just to be sure, you're comfortable, and I'm not saying you should have it, but there's no evidence that you're specifically looking for. You're just gonna look at the, and she can show you evidence, but again, with nothing directly from the board, you're just gonna let her, do, you know, the superintendent will, and you're comfortable with that.
Well, bullet-
even though there's no evidence.
Well, bullet point 2, uphold board policy. And I think that we have enough documentation in board policy to cover most instances. We've been around that road a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm fine, and in answer to your question, yeah, I think so, because I think well, first of all, Lori will provide evidence, even
Yeah,
if we
she
don't
will, but I just
specify
don't
what
want her
it
to
is.
come back and what the board, because, you
Yeah.
know, the fear, the worst fear of a superintendent, by the way, is.
Just this whole process?
Well, no. Well, it's going, no, okay, no, the worst, I'm not a superintendent, but I think that the worst fear is going through this process and then having somebody say, but you didn't do this.
Yeah.
And then she goes, but I didn't know you wanted me to do this. So that's the worst fear, is being evaluated on something you didn't know you were gonna be evaluated on.
Right.
So I don't know that any of these need to be, you know, teased out. I know, John, I just interrupted you, sorry. What were we gonna finish?
Yeah, no, I think all I was gonna say there was that I think too that a lot of these bullets under superintendent will in this section are the kinds of things where I think I'll know about whether they were or were not.
This is the qualitative anecdotal stuff, more than the metrics,
Yes.
data,
Yes.
you know, quantitative, but I just wanted to clarify that we're comfortable.
But now that we're talking, and I think maybe this will belong in one of standards 5, 6, or 7, but I'm not sure where, so I'll raise it now. I think there ought to be something about relationships with staff in here, and I don't see it. I see relationships with the board, I see relationships with the community, I don't see relationships with staff.
Maintain transparent and honest relationships with the Board of Education and staff, number 3.
Yeah, and is that enough? Maybe something about communication with staff as well.
Well, we
Might be nice.
have social and political environment on standard 5.
So just add under the communicate regularly with the Board of Education and staff.
Staff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
number 7 standard is communication and community relations. Should it be better placed there?
And that's where I ran into the problem. I can think of reasons to place it in a number of things,
And it's
and I
okay if
don't
there's
really care
overlap.
where it is.
So I added in bullet 4, which now I have enumerated, communicate regularly with Board of Ed, and I just add the staff there. So
Yeah.
it's in 3
Okay.
and 4.
That's fine. All right.
And then it'll be again under the communication standard.
Can I just ask a basic question on all of this, Barb, maybe you know, or you've done this before. So you have these different standards here, and we're going to rate them, and there'll be a number assigned to each one. And are these sort of just all viewed as equal weighted? So would somebody at the end of the process say, well, I just take them, I average them, the average rating number is this, and so then you get that sort of, that's your rating? Is that how somebody looks at this?
That's not how we would do it. It's a conversation, not a average. So,
Okay.
because an average could throw it off, you know, one person can completely throw off an average. It's really about the conversation. So
Okay.
the way I like to think about it is everybody's rating is very important, and then the conversation will determine what that ultimate final rating will be, but not an average.
Is there an ultimate final rating, or are we just sort of rating on each of these standards?
Well, in the past that John, when you've compiled this in the past, it's always,
We've never averaged the categories.
No,
We've
I'm just
averaged-
asking a question.
No, that's a good question.
We've given the superintendent, and we don't have to do it this way just because we did it in the past, but what we've done in the past is we would, so each board member would fill one of these out. We would then create a master document that would say, standard 4 ethics, and it would have an average of the ratings that were given by the 7 board members, and then it would have each of the 7 board members' comments, board member number 1, blah, board member number 2, blah, et cetera. And the document did not average among the categories, it just averaged among the board members within the category.
See, I think it's
So
almost
the-
more important to see,
To see the spread.
see the spread.
Yeah.
To see, because, you know, you get, 1 or 2 people can throw it off when it's important to know that she's getting all 4s, and then she got 1, and it kind of pulled it down. So I think My personal opinion, it's more about the conversation and seeing where everybody is, rather than just an average score.
Yeah.
You know.
Thanks.
And then just, to be clear about the end, at the end of this conversation too, my experience, and Barb, tell me if yours is different, so our superintendent has a 3-year contract. My experience is that a superintendent usually walks into her evaluation with, here's my self-evaluation. I hope at the end of this that you give me a good evaluation. I would like you to extend my contract by 1 year so that I still have 3 years remaining rather than 2. And I would like you to give me a raise, and here's what I suggest you give me. Because right now her contract does not provide for any raises, and that's typical for, as I understand it, for superintendents. So, at the end of the conversation, the board will have to take a vote on whether it is willing to extend the contract and whether it's willing to provide a raise or not. Is that generally how it works in
It is.
other districts?
That being said, standard 4 ethics, I think there's enough wording in there that I think we can move on. There's enough documentation to cover that. Standard 5, so the one thing that John mentioned, the communication staff, that will be added under specific areas, correct?
I did that before.
Okay. Social and political environments, anybody have anything to add in that? I don't have anything to add to standard 5. I have plenty for 7. Any have anything to add for 5? If not, and this may evolve over time. I mean, this is just something that we're going to toy with over the next year, and we may find that it has to be better defined a year from now. Policy number 6, policy or standard 6, policy and governance. Comments? I love bullet point number 3, promote shared decision-making throughout the organization. Lori, so far, do you feel that there's an environment inherent in the district right now where people feel free to share ideas and discussions and?
I do.
You do?
I do.
Okay. In other words, that doesn't have to be enhanced.
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, I think there's a lot of committees that meet, and we have team meetings, we have meetings with the area exec board. So I think there are plenty of avenues to dialogue and to get a variety of voices, heard. Are we on 6 now?
6, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, 6. I'm thinking policy. What can we do to enhance the implementation of policy? And short of, we already have the policy manual online. Are there any areas of policy that we need to remind people of? Like, for instance, the universal grievance policy to 2260, to let people know that if there are issues and conflicts, that there is a chain that they can follow, and if they've dissatisfaction all the way up to the line, there is a grievance policy that controls their final and ultimate appeal. That apparently wasn't full knowledge to at least one person who came up and spoke at the open meeting last time. So I'm wondering if,
She went all the way through the chain though.
well, she did, but she asked us basically to create a policy for which there was already a policy.
A policy if she didn't like her child's teacher placement.
Right.
That's what she wanted.
But there is an appeal process in place. So my point is, are there aspects of our policy manual that would be a good thing to know, that we could share with people? Like a small area on the internet, a FYI kind of thing. Does anybody feel that there are points of the policy manual that should be brought out.
I guess I would say I wouldn't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't know either.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with what the evaluation document says on policy. I imagine as Lori goes through the year, she may discover some things that require a little more communication, and if you communicate those, I suppose those will be
Right,
evidence in this category.
It's up there, it's available,
Yeah.
the policy, I steered a few folks there the
Mhm.
last couple of weeks to, where to find it, it's right under the board
Right.
tab.
Barb, how would you define governance?
Well,
Because it says policy and governance. How would you define governance?
sort of the way, the manner in which the board works together, to understanding roles and responsibilities of the board and the superintendent.
And so that's like kind of bullet 2 is a governance bullet.
Yeah,
Right?
Yeah. And I liked these
yeah, actually,
bullets.
that is, number 2 would be a good, definition of governance.
Yeah.
You said 4? Oh, you said 4?
No,
Oh.
I just said I like these bullets.
Uh-huh.
I think they're good, and I think, one thing, Lori, that I have hoped that the superintendent will be able to do is sort of be the leader in reminding us as board members, how a good, smooth governance system ought to be working. And these bullets do that.
And obviously, that's really tricky, because
Absolutely.
your boss,
Yeah.
I mean, you're the person you're their boss, and now she's telling you. So, I think that, as long as there's a common understanding from the board that they're comfortable with that, but otherwise, that's very difficult. You got a first-year superintendent that's telling her boss, stay out of my job, so, but you have a good working relationship with her, and if you trust her, and you want to know that, I mean, personally, I think a lot of times we get involved in things we really don't realize it before. I always theoretically we understand the difference between board role and superintendent role, but then when you get down into it's like, oh yeah. So some reminders are healthy and good, as long as people don't get offended if she says anything. In which case, it should come from your board president. But if around the table you're all comfortable with her doing that, and you're not going to come back in the evaluation and say, she's telling me to stay out of her job.
Well, and in part too, to me, having these bullets in here are designed to empower her.
Mhm.
Designed to, represent a commitment on our part to respect that.
That's a good
So,
point.
Any other comments? If not, standard 7, communication and community relations.
This would be one area, Lori, you had mentioned the dashboard, the Collins report that's live and real time.
Right.
And real time might be updated once a week or whatever you define it as. I'd like to see that as evidence in this particular case, is that the Collins report is online and it's updated no less than, you tell me what's right, but, if it's more than a month, I'm probably gonna question it. So, it'd be nice if it was almost like as we're spending money, it's kind of updated. It would just be nice to have a live dashboard.
The District 64 financial dashboard.
Exactly. I would like to have that done because we have been talking about that for a very long
Well,
time.
I would like to have it, but at what cost? I mean, if it's gonna cost a fortune to get something.
Right, we have to
like
find
that,
out how to
then-
build it, and that is definitely on MJ's, list of things to do, and as you know, she's got a lot going on. But she knows it's, something that I would really like to have, up and running, certainly for the future.
Well,
Would have to be constructed this year.
we should analyze so one of the lines there should be explore the potential for developing this particular facet.
It can be simple, guys. It can be
It
that
can.
we create an image of the Collins report and post it weekly, and then it evolves into something that's more live. I don't really care. I just want to see that information more real time than we get it.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see the public be able to access it easily and digest it.
Right.
I mean, maybe
I'm sure it'd probably be monthly, because that seems like the role
Yeah.
that the
Bills are paid
finances are
and
sort of struck
different-
on and
right.
everything, yeah.
Like, for instance, the Collins report was not updated from February till September. And that's not what we were really looking at.
Or there was a gap. I don't know what that gap was.
And I
but-
think right now the plan is it's not gonna be updated till next February. I can tell you that's the.
That's not the plan.
Input I've received, so.
Yeah, so if we could have, even like I said, even if it's just a web page that is static, or it's a PDF that's there, whatever it is, I'd like to have that
would be
available.
That would be the, easier way to accomplish it, would be to just.
And down the
put
road,
that
it could be
document
more of
on.
an interactive
And
dashboard we can ask.
Tony and I have talked about something that I would like to do in terms of the community, because I know everybody wants the community to know kind of where we are in terms of our financial footing, is to do some kind of an annual financial report that goes out to the community, and not just the parents, the entire community. So that is something that I've talked with Tony about, Bernadette and I have talked about it, I've talked with Becky about it, because it's an undertaking, but it's another nice way to make sure that the community understands how we spend our money and how those decisions are made.
Laura, would that be an annual financial report or an annual report?
Well, there's two things, and I've also talked to Tony about my desire to do an annual report to the community,
Yeah.
and then the financial is something separate. That's not to say that the annual
Could be
report won't
included.
have a financial piece,
Right.
but this, and you've seen the models that I have, they're very comprehensive, the financial report, as is the annual report.
Okay.
So that's something that I'm interested in doing each year, obviously annually, each year, because I think that's nice PR also for the district. And when you think about pushing the referendum out and you have folks that don't have kids in the school systems, I think it's important for them to know where their tax dollars are being spent
Yeah.
and how wisely and responsibly we're spending their tax dollars, and where the money's going.
The other thing I would make a plug
Should probably
for
put those-
in here that I've made a plug for in prior years as well, I would really like to see us do an annual community survey, or an annual survey at least of our stakeholders, with some questions that we ask annually, so that we can monitor our progress in part by the results on this year's survey versus the survey 5 years ago.
So one of the things, and linking to that, I'll just tell you a little bit about it now, but it'll be linked to my report on Monday when I talk about the PARA and the PIAC legislation. It's all under the umbrella of educational reform, Common Core, the new teacher evaluation, new principal evaluation, also surveys. So 2 years ago, if you remember, you did the 5 Essentials survey, and then it was not the best survey. So there were problems with the psychometrics and so on and so forth. So those results weren't shared. You were allowed to give that survey every other year. You have to give it every other year, but you were allowed to give it every year. Most people didn't give 5E this last school year because they were still working out the kinks. I've been watching legislatively what's happening with 5E, because I had been told a while back that there are lobbyists, one of which is a former superintendent I worked for at Northbrook. He's lobbying for more choice in the schools, to say, I'll give a survey. I will happily give a climate survey. We've done it in our district for the last decade, but I want a choice. So the last thing I heard when I went to a legislative lunch on Friday was that there are 3 options that we're going to have in terms of survey companies. So we can do the 5E. They haven't let us know what these other survey organizations are going to be. I'm hoping School Perceptions is one of them, because I agree with you that it is valuable to be able to give a climate survey to staff, to students at the upper grades, and to the parent community on an annual basis. So we'll watch for that, and as those decisions come down and are made official, I will certainly report to you. But we will be doing, we have to, but I also am a firm believer in giving people a voice through satisfaction surveys. We will be doing a survey this spring. And then you can decide as a board if you want to do that every year or every other year. But this year is a mandatory year, based on that legislative educational reform. So I'm going to put something about an annual report, that we have been talking about it, and then would you like me to add in terms of evidence, the survey? The
I think
community relations?
Evidence
survey?
would be an annual report
Okay.
and survey and report. I'll let you catch up
Go
there.
ahead. I think
In
you're
bullet
doing
point number 1, clearly articulate district vision, mission, and priorities to the community and media. That sentence is a direct corollary to some of the things outreach would be like the town hall meetings that we mentioned during the interview process and things like that. I think that would be a wonderful personal touch outreach to schools, whether you did it at each building twice a year, once a year. Just your presence in those buildings, allowing people to come directly to you, I believe would be a really showstopper as far as letting people know who you are, what you stand for, what you're doing in the community, what you're doing at that building. I would hope that others on the board feel that those kind of outreach programs would be important in communicating to the district what we're all about. And have you thought about, and God knows you've been busy, but have you thought about implementing that at some point?
Yes, so right now, as you know, I'm going to all the, the PTA meetings and doing my walk and talks with the principals who've been in each of the buildings a couple of times already. Working with my mentor, who is Jane Westerholt from District 62, Superintendent of the Year. She's my mentor. I'm so excited. So look out, everybody. But we have been talking about what I'm trying to decide if I want them to be superintendent advisory councils or different types of outreach. So that's one of the things that we're working on, and we're going to try to roll something out. I don't know exactly what. I was to meet with her on Monday, and then I wound up being sick that day, so we have to reschedule. But that was the one topic of discussion, that and student growth. So that is on the horizon in terms of putting something together. And Bernadette and I have also talked about increased communication. I'm going to be doing a monthly newsletter out to the community. We were talking just the other day about what structure that'll take.
Well, I think that's
ways to do outreach.
those are two good things then to put under evidence. Would be formulate a plan to do a group discussion or community discussion, and to formulate the superintendent newsletters. In bullet point 2, develop formal and informal techniques to gain external perceptions of the district. I remember back in your interview process, you also mentioned branding and developing a district brand. That has resonated with me ever since you said that, and I know I brought it back to you a couple of times. A lot of people, how people look at this district is basically all over the place. And I would love to enhance the brand image. That's not an easy thing to do. It is not an easy thing. I recognize that. And it's all part of how we sell the district. It's all part of your financial report at the end of the year. It's all part of how the district is positioned. And to put something down, develop a plan to enhance the brand image of the district is what I'd love to say. I have absolutely no idea, well, I do have an idea, on how you would want to get that implemented. But bullet point 2, to me, is basically stating enhance the brand.
Yep.
Now, how do you go about doing that? I think that we could probably just take the low-hanging fruit, and that might be to publicize every positive aspect that's possible, to get it out there, to continually let people know the good things that are happening. Because I think, that doesn't always happen.
No, that's through annual reports, newsletters, different events. Those are all ways in which you're branding. I think too, after you do a strategic plan, that's when you really dive into that conversation.
Yeah.
When you've identified for the next 5 years, what are our areas of focus? When you get the results from a group like CEC, what are our strengths? You can start celebrating and advertising those, and then letting people know, we understand that although we have these things going really well, we have these opportunities. It's all about, communication and getting the word out and being present. It's even, for me, branding, I'm, in one of my memos to you, it was Rotary, Kiwanis, and Chamber, oh my, like I'm, going to a lot of different community groups, but every time you make contact and you have conversations with people, you're spreading the word.
It's a consistent and persistent message over and over again, and that message has to come from every conceivable angle, and that's, so it's a concerted effort. So how you go about doing that, how we would hold you responsible for that. I'm not exactly sure of that wording, but I think that enhancing the brand image is pretty critical. I don't know if you have some thoughts on how to attain that. Maybe you can help us out.
I don't at this point, but it is something that I'm, looking into and talking with my mentor about. I think there's a session at the Tri-Conference, in October, I was invited to go to a district administrator, superintendent summit in Rhode Island that they're paying for, which is nice. I've never been to Rhode Island, so we'll see if it's nice. I'm not really sure, but,
It's very smooth.
is it really? That I know. One of the sessions at that conference has to do with branding. So, we'll see. I mean, I'm on the hunt for information, but I don't have a clear plan yet in terms. But I don't know if I see it as a big event yet, or if I see it as a lot of small things that are going to help us build the brand, or if it's a combination of both.
I would think it's more the latter than the former, but yeah, a lot of little things.
Do we do anything currently, as far as the media goes? I'm sure they contact us and stuff. But do we do anything where we're trying to sort of push positive things out to them?
Absolutely.
Okay, that was just a question. I see stuff, I just didn't know how, if we, so I didn't know if you wanted to just incorporate that in here, because I know it talks about vision, mission, and priorities to the media, but also just, when you're talking about branding, sort of thinking about,
That's
adding that in there just as.
the ways in which we've reached out, or, Bernadette is great about that.
Because I know a lot of organizations too will, maybe try to time those things, so you sort of space them out a little, so you don't have 5 stories one week, but maybe spread them out a little with the media, so you're just always hitting people with, positive stuff all the time.
Piggybacking on that, you guys probably thought of it, but when our company buys the media, that these local publications are really always looking for content, like, because they've cut their staffs and, it's just the state of the industry. Would they ever entertain like a column from the superintendent once a month, where just a state of the community? Would they ever entertain like an open letter comes once a month, and it's I'm just wondering, where they're looking for content all the time and they don't have a big budget. Just throwing it out there, like,
What's your experience, Bernadette, with some of the local papers? Are they receptive to our supplying them with basically non-paid advertising, which would be our message to them?
Or just an open letter from the superintendent to the community saying, here's what's going on. You know what I mean? I don't know, because you see that editorial section, and maybe we ought to have a standing place on it. Just a thought.
They will take things occasionally, but they're not going to give up their space permanently to us. No, that would be. And again, in terms of what they're looking for, they are looking for things that are topical, and we do have a planned calendar through the year of topics that we address month by month, of things, stories, because they're organic, coming from what we are doing as a district and the highlights that we have happening, through time throughout the year. But certainly providing letters, that could appear on the editorial page. They're receptive to receiving them, but they're not going to promise, space to us, and it's not going to be every week or, I think they like to engage in conversation. They like to have people have differing points of view. Those opinion pages are trying to elicit that kind of active commenting and conversation, more or less, on different topics.
Bernadette, how important, let's just take one newspaper, the Herald Advocate. How important do you think it would be for the district to, as one component, to develop the brand image, to get information to the public, to have a once a month, and I understand these things, they're better the more frequent that you put them in, I get that. Let's say on a once a month basis that there is a letter from Dr. Heinz that would be in the newspaper. Forget everything else. How effective do you think that would be toward achieving our goal of branding and sharing information? Would it be effective? Once a month.
Well, If you want it to appear once a month, we're going to have to take out a paid ad for it to
That's
appear
my-
once a month.
that's
because
my-
that's not going to happen.
That's my second half
just
to
by-
that. My first question is, do you think it's important? Because if it's important, maybe we should be doing that and buy some space.
I would have to say, again, you're talking within an overall mix and an overall plan. So to pull out one publication, because putting in a letter, again, it's got to be a certain length, it's going to be, and if it's not, they're not going to include it. They do reserve the right to edit it for length. And again, having a frequent flyer when they are trying to cover a variety of issues and move through the year and other topics that they have to address, there's no guarantee that they're going to be interested in covering or including comments. That's why I think it's better to do it at a few times that have a targeted message that we really are trying to get out. We also, though, try to feed story ideas regularly to them. We try to provide photo opportunities, invitations for them to enter our schools for particular events. We don't have a blanket invitation. We do it for particular things that are happening that we feel are of good value, that are instructive of what our educational program is about, and would like to illustrate that and invite them to come in and develop a story about that. So we have a plan in place that way of what we try to reach out for. And again, their space is so limited in terms of what they can include, their reporters' time. So we try to develop a lot of background information that is helpful to the reporters so they can pick up our stories kind of quickly and have that knowledge base readily, provide a lot of detailed comments, interviews, that kind of thing, so they can develop their own stories if they want to do that, provide them those ideas. But again, they're competing, the news hole is pretty small, so they have to cover all the other news that's happening in our community that week, and it's going to change depending on what's going on. So, that's why we can attempt to do a lot of things, but they're their own publication and they make their own editorial decisions. Things that we do control and we would like to do more of in terms of starting an e-newsletter that's an expansion of the one we do now, but it's certainly within our goals for the year, and Dr. Hines and I have spoken about it, to provide that kind of driving out of our own information more readily. We did change our photo policy that is going to be very helpful to us in being able to include many more visuals of our students, which we had a more restrictive policy in the past. Now, this year, we took the opportunity when we went to our InfoSnap registration system to update that photo policy and be able to gather then and use more photos. And so we're going to have some ideas like that that are, going to be able to push out more information. But I realize this is the superintendent's evaluation evening, so.
Totally.
So, yeah, thanks for that. I think, I don't know if you either want to put something in there or everybody just figures the top part where it says handles media relations covers it, but it sounds like it's already in place, but I know there's other things that are already being done that are in the expectations here, so I don't know if that's something you want to have aligned regarding, but I don't know.
So the evidence bullets, since just through this conversation, I have explore potential for development of a digital District 64 financial dashboard, develop a District 64 annual report, conduct a climate survey and report results to the Board of Ed, formulate a plan for community outreach, and establish monthly superintendent newsletters. Those are some of the bullets from the dialogue around the table.
I think that'll capture it. Okay. Anybody have any other comments on communication? I think that we have kind of gone through this, and I think that we have created a nice objective document that we can look back on and say, you wanted to do this, but it's not done, or you went, not only did you finish this, but times two. I think that we can see very readily, utilizing this document and your roadmap, that I think that we can very readily see where we're going, what you want to do, attempt to do, and get done. I guess, you know, the reality is, I think we now can make some sort of objective evaluation, and maybe this is or isn't the time to start talking about compensation, but, you know, there is compensation tied to that, and maybe that's a decision to be made by a year from now. Where does that fit in, Barb? How do you adjudicate compensation tied in with evaluations? Do you plan for that now? Do you only discuss it at the end?
Well, I think it's a philosophical decision. I mean, do you want to put, you know, specific money on specific areas, or do you want to look at the whole thing and just say, based on this evaluation, we want to give you X amount of money? And, you know, it's really, it's a decision between, I think, the board and the superintendent to have that. You know, if you want to have specific money going towards things, or just a general, you know. I think that the specific money is not as prevalent. I don't know, Laura, what you think? You know, where there's specific dollars tied to certain things. There are sometimes, you know, or it'll say a superintendent will get X amount of bonus if they do this, that, or the other thing. You know, it's really a board decision. I think most boards will look at the evaluation as a whole, and look at the money that's available, and also the comparables, you know, like districts in the area, those kinds of things, when you're looking at a superintendent evaluation. Also, this is her first year as a superintendent and here, so her superintendent salary is going to be a little bit different than those who've been around for a longer time and have been superintendents for longer.
So what I hear you saying is that there's no need to consider that necessarily just now, and it's certainly something that we can evaluate as we go forward. Okay. Any other thoughts on superintendent evaluation? And if not, the flip side of this, as we spoke about previously, was the committee structure. But being that it is 25 after 9 at this point, I am reluctant to get involved into a discussion that might last another hour and a half or 2 hours. So with your approval, I think we'll table that to some other time, so that we can leave knowing and feeling good that we have worked and created a good superintendent evaluation process that will cover us for the next year.
My only suggestion would be to ask maybe Lori, when will they see the corrections and
1 minute, because I'm typing board members. Right.
Well, okay, but then, okay, so that's when they'll receive it, but when is there gonna be a discussion on the final document?
Well, actually, we have to look at the final document, because that's a good point, because it will have to come at an open meeting. We will have to vote to agree on this document. And I'd like to do that in an open meeting so that everybody is completely aware of this document. And these items, by the way, will be added to the contract? Mm-hmm. Is that, yeah,
well,
the whole evaluation document will be added to the contract.
Just do my goal areas.
I'm gonna let the Lord
I'll talk
talk about
to Sarah.
that.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know that you necessarily amend the contract to include that. You probably look back at what the goals say, and if the goals are inconsistent with what we've just done, then you may need to do a contract amendment to cover that, but I'm not sure you staple the whole
No, I mean,
evaluation.
the performance goal is really, the only thing I would suggest, and this would be a lawyer's decision, would, if you wanted to tighten up the student growth thing or whatever, because it really, the law just says, you know, student growth, and so student achievement, student growth, or whatever it says. So you might want to put numbers in there, but I don't know. That's a.
Well, I think a quick call to Terry, because she's the one who helped provide the answers for that section, and she.
And Sarah Buchek for me.
Yeah. So if you talk to Sarah, if you give a call to Terry, because Terry's intimate with
Sure.
your contract,
Yeah.
and see what Terry says about that, because the goals were absolutely nebulous, and we just put them in
Yeah,
just to
that's-
cover the requirements of state law.
Each performance-based contract shall include the goals and indicators of student performance and academic improvement determined and used by the local board. So there may be some more specificity of just that particular area.
And I think the answer will be it does not matter whether it's in the contract document, because ultimately the board will do the evaluation the board does. And if we've agreed to use this evaluation tool, then that's what we're gonna use, whether or not you do anything with the contract.
So can we just add this to the agenda for Monday then, if the document's done, and we just look at it over the weekend and,
You can't now, it's too late, right?
or if it's too late for that,
No,
can't
it's
we,
48
we
hours.
can?
48, so
Oh,
this is,
48,
what
yeah.
is this, Thursday?
This is Thursday.
Yeah,
It would have
we
to,
could.
it would have to be added Monday, tomorrow morning. No, tomorrow, 5 o'clock,
Yeah.
tomorrow night.
Oh, it's already posted, they're saying.
or if not,
You
we,
can change it.
we could take a
You
vote
could.
at the meeting to add it to the agenda.
You can't take
right?
action
Well,
now.
no, you can't.
No, it has to be
Yeah.
posted.
Wow.
Has to have 48
But it's
hours.
48 clock hours, it's not 48-hour business hours.
So you could put a revised agenda
Okay.
up on the website tomorrow.
So just-
And just so you know, just to be clear, this meeting was correctly in open session because you're not talking about her evaluation, you're talking about the instrument. That's why, and same thing at the board meeting. When you actually start talking about her evaluation, that's when it's closed. But this is open, approving it's open, the instrument is, foible, so.
I'll have Madeline revise the agenda, I'm sending you an email right now
And
with
she'll-
what I'm hoping is the final stuff. You guys can read
And
it,
she'll-
if you catch anything.
And she'll send it out electronically.
In the interest of transparency for Monday's meeting, in addition to revising the agenda, the reports for Monday's meeting should have this included somewhere, even if you have to add a few PDF pages at the beginning or the end. Because it's not quite fair to the public to have it on the agenda, have all the board members talking about this piece of paper and not have any way to see it themselves.
I would have just assumed that it would automatically have been included.
Well, see, except that train has probably already left the station because it's Thursday now.
It can, but there's nothing, yeah,
There's nothing to stop it.
there's nothing, as long as the results of the evaluation don't.
Right.
But just the
The
tool
tool.
is open.
Sure.
And certainly if we're gonna talk about it in open session and then vote on it, people ought to be able to see what we just voted on.
That's a good point, John. I would have assumed that it was just been added.
Very good work. I mean, you knocked this thing out, but I have to say, it wouldn't have happened if Dr. Hines hadn't submitted this first. Because when you just sort of start with a blank piece of paper, it's a long drawn out, and you don't do it in 2.5 hours.
Just very quickly before we adjourn, two quick things that before we can. ABC, we want to get that information out. John, you said maybe you would consider participating as a board member. Bob, you said you might, and Tony. Is anybody else interested in serving on that ABC and board service?
If you need somebody.
Information night we're gonna have?
And I'm definitely in the category of if you need someone, because I know you can't have more than two
Two.
people. I have no particular, and remind me what date it is again, sorry.
October 22nd?
Okay, yeah.
No,
no,
hold on.
that's-
Well, I
I'm
hope
a-
not, that's
I've,
your.
wait, I've got it in my calendar.
I'm available if you need me, but
28?
Yep.
Yeah.
Tuesday, October 28th, 7 o'clock.
I'm the same way. If you need somebody, call me. And if you got enough, that's fine.
the other thing I would say too is probably both. No more than one of those two board members ought to be somebody whose term is up. And I would say Tony as board president has dibs, so that if he wants to be there, then I should not be there.
Okay. Scott, then do you want to be there?
Yeah, if you want me to be there,
All right.
shoot me a line and I'll be happy
Tony
to
and
be there.
Scott? And then iPad, in terms of preparation for the electronic board packet discussion, I have John, iPad, bring. Vicki, you said iPad and or Mac, so you kind of pick your poison, whichever one you'd rather work
I
off
want
of.
to do iPad, I talked to my husband.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dathan, you bring a Mac, but that's, I wrote you down, I just wanted to confirm. Tony, Chromebook, Scott, said iPad. Dan, I don't know, he's not here. And Okay.
I don't own an iPad. I wouldn't know how to turn one on. But
Your daughter can help you.
But she could. But I thought if our students are using a Chromebook, maybe I should use one too. That's why I opted for that,
Now,
but.
the issue we're gonna have,
Do you
just
have
so
a
you
Chromebook
guys
at
know,
home?
is the
Or
Chromebooks,
iPad?
My kids have.
they're in short supply out there in the world, believe it or not. So we've ordered a bunch to have loaners and replacements and, you know, just additional stock, and we're having a hard time. We need a black market for Chromebooks, because we need some. So I'm glad we're only needing 2. Honestly, that'll be easier than if we needed to
Maybe,
come up with
maybe talk to some
7.
Maine South graduates.
Yeah,
No, they
right.
wouldn't have graduated
Well,
yet, they're
enough.
still in school, that's right.
They don't have the same brand though we do.
Ah,
We have
okay.
Dell and a different model and a whole bit.
Steal my daughter's.
Okay. All right.
All right.
So we'll see you Monday. I will make
Well,
sure the agenda is
any
done.
further comments by the board?
Thank you, Barb.
And if not, we'll need a motion to go.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Great.